Sampear halala wena la telekiweke exitipani swa vutlhari after tingiwa etimitani ta vutivi a sekiwa hi galasa ra vutshila hakari mina ntambi ya mutana wa xambela ku tlawa madhafula ri la tsundzuka n'wana hi kweta ndzi n'wi hluvulela swihuku ni rungula u ringana na ndlopfu halala Aldrin Sampear halala.
Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
It is 8 minutes after 3 o'clock. Good afternoon and welcome to Beyond the Headline with me, Aldrin Sampear. Thank you so much for choosing us this afternoon. We're with you from now up until 6 o'clock. So coming up on the show, we're going to start off a conversation with Brigadier Aldrin Sampear, who's the spokesperson for the police. 7 suspect that has now been arrested in connection with the murder of Keenan Forbes, as well as his friend and former manager, Tips Mutwane or Tibelo Mutwane. So we'll be speaking to Aldrin Sampear around this. Remember, yesterday there was that press briefing with the Provincial Police Commissioner of KwaZulu-Natal, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, as well as the Minister of Police, Bheki Cele, and they spoke about the 6 people that have been arrested, 2 in Eswatini and 4 in KwaZulu-Natal, and now the 7th suspect has been arrested. We'll speak to Brigadier Aldrin Sampear in the next short while. Also on the show this afternoon, we speak to Ria Pierre, the former South African National Police Commissioner, and this is in relation to school violence, and which he says needs to immediately end. But how do you end it? How do you do it? And as it's always been said, that what happens in schools is also a mirror of what happens in our societies. So what happens in those societies also play out in schools. So she'll be joining us at 20 to 4 to have that conversation. And then Vodacom. So Vodacom this morning issued a statement that they are going to petition the Constitutional Court to appeal the Supreme Court of Appeals decision that was in favor of Makate, and this is in relation to the Please Call Me saga. It is ongoing. So again, they're going back to the Constitutional Court. One of the issues that they raise in the statement is that they believe that the impact of the recent SCA judgment, if upheld, would be vast and wide-ranging on the attractiveness of South Africa as an investment destination. It also says that it would negatively impact our employees, shareholders, and Vodacom's contribution to public finances. I assume that public finances, they mean that the tax, corporate income tax that Vodacom would pay to the receiver of revenue, the tax collector, SARS. I wonder what you then make of this. What do you make of this? That now, again, the Vodacom, the network provider, is now going back to the Constitutional Court, so the matter is now ongoing. Nkosana tweeted a bit earlier on as well, or X'd a bit earlier on, that they've seen that Vodacom has issued this statement and trying to persuade the public, but they will be also responding silently, he says. And speaking about the public, this ongoing saga, has it had an impact on how you perceive brand Vodacom? Has it had an impact on how you perceive brand Vodacom? So the conversation that we want to have a bit later on is around the reputational risk, the reputational harm for brand Vodacom with this ongoing saga. Some people have spoken about boycotting Vodacom. Are you amongst those people that have said, I would boycott Vodacom? And then also, when it comes to consumer activism in this country, it's a bit very different to other countries, and also it's nothing close to what we saw during the height of apartheid with the potato boycott. Remember the potato boycott during the height of apartheid? But what do you make of it? Are you a subscriber? Do you use a Vodacom? Or are you one of those people that say that it's just another matter, a former employee battling it out with his former employer, and there's nothing much to it, and you just move on? Or are you one of those people that are saying that maybe I might have to relook my decision of being a subscriber of Vodacom, because there is the reputational risk and the reputational harm that Vodacom could potentially be faced with? And then also the shareholders. The shareholders of Vodacom, what questions are they asking of the CEO around the handling of this matter? 0614-104107, and you can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear. Our studio line is 086 000 2032.
The only talk radio afternoon drive show that makes sense. Beyond the Headline with Aldrin Sampear, right here on SAFM.
It is 12 minutes after 3 o'clock. We're in conversation next with Brigadier Aldrin Sampear, who's the spokesperson for the police. 7 suspects have now been arrested in connection with the murders of the South African rapper Keenan Forbes, popularly known as AKA, and his close friend, celebrity chef and entrepreneur Dibelo Tips Muchwana. The latest from the police is that the suspects are all due to appear in court tomorrow. Aldrin Sampear is now joining us on the line. Brigadier, good afternoon. Thank you so much for making time for us. So the 6 suspects that were announced yesterday that have been arrested, 2 in Eswatini, 4 in KwaZulu-Natal, but now the 7th person has been arrested.
A very good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. Indeed, we can confirm that a 7th suspect was arrested this morning by the team in KZN in Durban, to be specific. He will join 6 others that are currently facing charges of murder in relation to the AKA and Dibelo murder case. I think on our side, we are quite proud of the team that has put together thus far a watertight case, a case that will be able to stand in court. It's been a very long year, but when we look at the timeline of arrests, we can see that this team has been hard at work in putting together this case. I think the manner in which they've handled this case very professionally, they took their time, they didn't rush into making announcements and rush into making arrests. So they ensured they employ a meticulous investigation to ensure that the right people eventually are arrested and put behind bars. You will recall that the provincial commissioner highlighted that we employed a different strategy when it comes to this case because of its sensitivity and the manner in which it was executed. So we arrested people as the first suspect as far back as April last year. We kept him in custody. We did not charge him or yet on this particular case. We kept these suspects in custody on other cases that they were being wanted for, and we made sure then we wrap up the case. We round up all suspects to ensure that we put them in behind bars to ensure that they answer to the crimes that they have committed.
And with the 7th suspect, is it known whether the person handed themselves over like the 6th suspect?
He did not hand himself over. I wouldn't say they handed themselves over. It was because our team was hard at work in tracing the suspects. I mean, if a person hands themselves over, it means they know police are investigating and they voluntarily surrender themselves. So I wouldn't say any person, any suspect in this case has handed themselves over. They knew they were being wanted. They did not cooperate, and we went out there. We found them. As far as Eswatini, and I think we need to commend the Eswatini police for cooperating with us, because as soon as we alerted them that there were 2 suspects that were linked to this particular case and they were wanted in connection with this case, they were very cooperative. They executed the warrant. The 2 have already appeared in court, and now it's a matter of extradition processes between the 2 countries for them to join these 5 other suspects before the Durban Magistrates Court.
Yeah. So with the 5 suspects, are they all appearing in court tomorrow?
The information that we have is that all 5 will appear at this stage tomorrow in court to be formally charged on this particular case. We know that about 3 to 4 of them were already in, we had actually 3 in custody. The 3 were arrested between April and December last year, and they were already charged in other cases. So it's a matter of bringing them in court now to be formally formally charged with this particular case. And I think we are quite confident with looking at the progress that this investigating team has made. We are quite confident that we've got the right people. We are quite confident that they have worked hard to ensure a watertight case that will be able to stand in court and to ensure that during the trial we oppose bail.
Okay, during the trial, you oppose bail. Thank you so much for your time. Brigadier Mate is the spokesperson for the police, and this is in relation to the 7 suspects that have now been nabbed in connection to the murder of Keenan, aka Forbes, as well as Tibelo Tips Mutswane. And yesterday, the announcement also being made by the Provincial Police Commissioner, Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, as well as the Minister of Police, Bheki Cele. 0614 104 107, and your ex at Aldrin Sampear. Studio line is 086 000 2032.
Attention all HPCSA registered practitioners. It is your responsibility to comply with CPD requirements. Non-compliance may result in suspension, writing a compulsory board examination, or other penalties imposed by the professional boards. The CPD program is ongoing and practitioners must immediately comply to remain registered with council. To view your CPD status, update contact details or perform other self-service functions, access the HPCSA online portal or visit www.hpcsa.co.za.
Diable Noir can't wait to demonstrate to Sekhukhune United that what they did to them in Limpopo will not prevail in Brazzaville. Meanwhile, Babina Nogo targets another victory against Yakati Yamama
when they close the group stage curtain. This is the CAF Confederation Cup.
Catch Diable Noir FC and Sekhukhune United FC on Sunday 3 March at 6 p.m. live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com.
Hashtag We Love It Here.
Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
The South African Broadcasting Corporation would like to alert the public of an email correspondence purporting to be that of the SABC, threatening the public that they will be issued with a warrant of arrest for non-payment of TV license fees. The public is advised to ignore the contents of a correspondence coming from an email address jjm@mega.bw. This is not an SABC email address, and the corporation will not at any point threaten anyone with a warrant of arrest. The SABC also advises the public not to download any statement from this fake email as instructed. The SABC TV Licenses Department can be reached on 011 3309 555 or can be accessed through an email to tvlic.info@sabc.co.za for friendly and kind customer service. Alternatively, the public may use our secure website, which is www.tvlic.co.za, to download statements.
You are listening to Aldrin Sampear on SAFM.
20 minutes after 3 o'clock, French President Emmanuel Macron announced recently that France could not rule out sending troops on the ground to Ukraine and that he would maintain a strategic ambiguity on the subject. Take a listen to what he had to say to Reuters.
Meanwhile, the United States and NATO allies have ruled out sending troops to Ukraine. This comes after French President Emmanuel Macron said that sending troops to Ukraine cannot be ruled out. Well, US, which is Ukraine's biggest ally in its war against Russia, says it has no plans to send troops to fight in Ukraine. Take a listen.
The only U.S. military personnel that are in Ukraine are associated with the embassy as part of the Defense Attaché office, and they're doing important work in terms of helping us with the accountability of weapons and systems that are provided to Ukraine. The president's been clear there's not going to be U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine.
NATO allies like Germany, UK and Italy also said that there is no change to the agreed position that no European country or NATO member state will send troops to Ukraine. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg also denied considering sending troops to Ukraine. However, Stoltenberg insisted that the military alliance will continue to support Ukraine in its war against Russia. Earlier, Macron hinted at the possibility of sending troops to Ukraine. This after a meeting with European leaders in Paris that aimed to send Moscow a strong message of Western resolve over support for Kiev. The leaders in Paris discussed the formation of a new coalition to supply Ukraine with missiles and bombs of medium and long range.
Priorité des priorités est la question des munitions.
Everything was discussed in a free and direct manner tonight. There was no consensus today to send troops onto the ground in a manner that's official, assumed and endorsed. But on the dynamic, nothing should be excluded. We will do everything so that Russia cannot win this war.
Aller au bout des stocks qui sont encore disponibles, à identifier les pays.
Now, Kremlin also warned that the conflict between Russia and the US-led NATO military alliance would become inevitable if European members of NATO troops fight in Ukraine. Meanwhile, in Washington, US President Joe Biden held one of the most intense meetings in the Oval Office. Well, that's of course according to the Senate Democratic Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. The meeting was over the crucial Ukraine aid that is facing an uphill task in the US Congress. Biden has urged the lawmakers to approve the $95 billion package, which includes $60 billion for Ukraine. And for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report from New York. Take a look.
House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries said that he was optimistic that a government shutdown would be averted, noting that while some disputes still remain, House Speaker Mike Johnson also said that he did not want to see a lapse in funding. Still, lawmakers are just a few days away, at the end of the day on Friday to be exact, to find an agreement before some agencies will be impacted. And as for now, no clear plan has been announced. Johnson was also optimistic. However, Chuck Schumer, speaking after the meeting to reporters, said that the conversation did turn intense on the issue of Ukraine, as House Republicans still insist that the priority must be for the United States to address its own problems, notably at the southern border. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Hashtag SAFMBTH.
0614-104-107. It's 24 minutes after 3 o'clock. In conversation next with Isaac Homo, African Affairs commentator. So post a 2-day national dialogue that concluded yesterday, we ask, what's next for Senegal? Understand that a group of Senegalese civic and religious leaders proposed holding the elections in early June. Also, those who were part of the dialogue called for the Constitutional Council to review decisions that blocked candidates, including Karim Wade and the opposition leader and son of former Senegalese President Abdoulaye Wade from the ballot. For more analysis on this, Isaac is now joining us on the line. Isaac, good afternoon. Thank you so much for making time for us. Today is the 28th of February, and according to the election timetable, this would have been time that we speak about what the trickling in votes are telling us. But no, the conversation that's actually being held is when the elections will now be taking place. The possibility of these elections happening on the 2nd of June, what do you think?
Well, I don't know. The father said that with the possibility of going taking place, it's up to the situation, how it's going to unfold on the ground. But of course, the election was supposed to have taken place on the 25th of February. Yeah, but that is just that. I mean, to say that the whole election issue has been fraught with some very, very, very disturbing issues, which are actually orchestrated by the incumbents.
So the proposal of having the elections on the 2nd of June also means that it will be a date after, according to President Macky Sall, had said that he would step down in April. I wonder what that means, that if the elections do happen in June, he would review that decision around stepping down.
Yeah, that's the situation. You see, I mean to say that President Macky Sall has actually surprised many people, that other people are not surprised at all. President Macky Sall, he was supposed, his term ends in 2nd April. The election was supposed to take place on the 25th. But now they wanted to postpone the election up to December. And in that interim time, they said that Macky Sall was supposed to have continued as the president. But now that actually was going against the Constitution, and that is the start of the whole issue. But there are other issues involved. That Macky Sall, for the last year or year and a half, he was actually been targeting certain very powerful opposition leaders. I'm talking about Osman Sanko, who's now in jail. He's been in jail. Various charges are brought against him. He won against some, but every time charges have been brought. And now he's been jailed for being liable to actually castigating one of the ministers that has been charged. He's been fined $330,000. So you find that President Marcus Sall has actually been, it's not been fair, and he has actually been very unconstitutional in trying to make sure that certain opposition leaders and parties won't be there. As it is, Sonko's party has been debased. He's no longer there. So that's a very disturbing issue.
Yeah. 16 out of 19 of the candidates running for the presidential post have opted not to form part of this dialogue. What impact would this then have? Or for me, it almost seems as though that the foundation is already laid to argue that if the elections were to happen in June, it is not within the court order that was set down to say that the elections must happen as soon as possible. 4 months later than when the elections were supposed to take place?
No, I don't know what's going to happen, but that's a recipe for confusion, and not only confusion, even army intervention. The trouble is this, that President Macky Sall had just come back from attending a meeting with the EU or with France. That's talking about cooperation between the EU and Africa. Yeah, but then you find that the whole crux of the matter is this, that Senegal has just discovered a huge deposit of oil and gas. And the French are interested in actually cornering that. Of course, it's discovered by the French company. But now with the problem that Europe is facing, energy problem, that's one of the key issues that they want to secure Senegal. So we find that there is an external force which is there trying to actually manipulate and dictate the course of the politics of Senegal. If you understood that the opposition leader, Osman Sanko, he is a person who's actually running it's a civic organization. Yeah, it's not more of a civic organization than a party. And it appears that he's actually very much anti-French, and he's also calling for ethics, fraternity, and end of corruption. So you can find that the whole establishment is there to make sure that the candidates who are going to take over Senegal are those who are going to be acceptable to the French and to the design of issues, of African issues. Yeah, basically to favor the former colonial master.
Thank you so much for your time. Azukomo is African Affairs commentator. It's a minute after 3:30, time for the news headlines.
In news making headlines for this hour, the National Defence Force says it has discovered that at least 22 people who are not on its books were called up for the Umzimvubu regiment to quell the unrest in KZN in 2021. Billions of rands in damage and losses were caused during the looting and violence in July. In other news, the DA has filed papers in the High Court in Pretoria seeking leave to appeal the full bench judgment that dismissed with costs its bid to have the policy of cadre deployment declared unconstitutional. And lastly, police have arrested 3 men between the ages of 32 and 34 at Beaufort West in the Karoo while they are allegedly on their way to Eastern Cape to commit a crime. I have more on these and other stories at the top of the hour. For SFM News, I'm Eva Chipa.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very good afternoon. If you're on the R24 heading out towards the airport at Joburg, there's a really big delay. The speed of crash has been with us most of the day so far. It's the R24 east onto the R21 north. That's where the restriction is. And the traffic heading along the R24 airport bounds, backing up beyond Barber Road and looking quite heavy. There's a crash going into Durban on the N3. It's just by Pavilion Mall. Traffic's already parking back through towards Paradise Valley. So from Pinetown into Durban, it's all badly snarled up. We had the striking municipal workers dump a massive load of sand on the N2 North near the Prospector exit a little bit earlier today. The big backlog is worked through. It is a little bit slow. There's a bit of traffic on the Prospector Bridge over the N2 and a little bit of traffic just being held up on the N2 North, but it's well off what it was from earlier today. And a crash around Cliffdale. If you're on your way to Pietermaritzburg, just watch for some delays from Peacevale going into that scene. And then Cape Town, very heavy through Hospital Bend. It's a broken down vehicle just by Lisbeth Parkway on the N2 outbound. So you've got a major backlog on Nelson Mandela Boulevard coming out of the CBD. You've got traffic queuing on the Philip Cosana run through from Gardens to Hospital Bend to get into the N2. And you've got a big standstill on the M3 inbound from UCT with the delay getting into that Hospital Bend area as well. Pretty hot day across Cape Town where I am, 37 degrees currently. So watch for a bit of beach going traffic as we get through this afternoon with those sort of temperatures. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sports with Duming Kapele.
And the Proteas have a new
coach.
Speaking about netball now.
The Spa Proteas.
Sorry. We need to include the sponsor as well.
Yes. That's how you can differentiate them from the Proteas.
The Spa Proteas.
We must just say the netball Proteas.
The netball Proteas. The Spa Proteas. So they've got a new coach.
They do have a new coach.
Are they going to miss Norma?
I don't think so. She's very good. The lady that has been announced as the head coach, she's quite good. She was actually even under Norma when they went to the World Cup. Norma was like a mentor to her, so they were kind of like molding her to be the next coach. She was the under-21 coach at one stage. She's won a couple of titles in the Telkom Netball League, so she's capable.
She's very capable. Yeah. Okay.
A very good afternoon to you. Yes, we start on that netball note where Netball South Africa have announced Jenny van Dijk as the new head coach of the Spa Proteas. Jenny has been given a 4-year contract and will lead the team to the 2027 Netball World Cup in Australia, among other tournaments, and will be assisted by former Spa Proteas captain and Mati's coach, Zanele Mdodana. Now, van Dijk has won 5 consecutive titles with the Jaguars in the Telkom Netball League. She also has led the University of Pretoria netball team to a few finals and titles in the Varsity Cup, and prior to her appointment she was the under-21 team coach who are scheduled to play in the Netball World Youth Cup 2025 qualifiers in March. So she's very capable of leading the national team. In football, Mamelodi Sundowns coach Rulani Mokoena has refused to be drawn into another war of words with TS Galaxy counterpart Siad Ramovic, but in his attempt to close the chapter, he claimed that the Serbian is an attention seeker. Asked to respond to accusations made by Ramovic last week that he hurled insults at him during a phone call, Mokoena, who was first reluctant, believes that the Galaxy mentor just wants to be noticed.
Guys, all he's crying for, I don't know why you guys can't hear the underlying message. It's underlying, it's like this. All he's crying for is, guys, he's won 5 games in a row. Give him attention. Give him praise. He wants attention. Give it to him. The guy is pleading. He's saying, I've won 5 games in a row. No one is talking. Mahlatsi, put him on the headlines there. Why don't you do it, guys? No, he's won 5 games. He's told you. He's got 8 assists from his left back. He's told you, guys, give him. Give him what he wants. Because if you don't give him what he wants, he goes and seeks for it.
So, okay, wait, what's Rulani on about?
So they've been fighting, and this fight started
but Rulani is fighting with everyone also.
So this fight started last year when Sundowns were knocked out by TS Galaxy out of the Carling Cup, right? And after they were knocked out, Rulani was saying, no, Mamelodi Sundowns lost because most of their players are playing for Bafana Bafana.
Yeah.
So then the TS Galaxy coach was like, that's not being sportsmanship-like.
Mm-hmm.
You're so loser. So since then, it's been like a war of words. And Ramovic was saying that at one stage, Rulani was busy using foul language towards him.
Wait, I thought that they said, Guti, they've dealt with this issue.
Well, this is.
Didn't they last week say that this issue has been dealt with?
This is his response now.
Okay.
But nonetheless, Mokoena still insists that he has a lot of respect for Galaxy owner and chairman Tim Sukazi.
Sometimes as coaches, we have to be very careful, very, very careful, because it's very difficult. It's difficult because I'll sit here and I'll say things, but why should I say things about TS Galaxy and forget that it's not even Seed's club, it's Tim Sukazi's club, and I've got a lot of respect for Tim, so I can't sit here and talk other things. There's a lot of things I could tell you. Just go back to the recording that you got from Sokala Duma, where you put it that there was a recording during a meeting, and you had things that were said there. So it's very easy to go into that space, but I can't go into that space. So because I have to respect, especially I have to respect South Africans and people who work very hard, like Tim, to run a football club and to do the things that he's done.
In other football news, Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag says that he does not require promises of job security from new co-owner Jim Ratcliffe amid uncertainty over his future. He says that his main focus right now is ensuring that the club continues to progress and improve. Ten Hag was hired back in 2022 and guided United to a third-place finish in the Premier League as well as the League Cup title in his first season, but the current season just seems not to be going according to plan. In cricket, pace bowler Mohammad Shami is out of this year's Indian Premier League after having surgery on his Achilles tendon. Shami, who plays for Gujarat Titans, posted photographs on social media of himself in hospital after the operation yesterday, and he said that recovery will take some time, meaning that he will miss the glitzy T20 league that begins next month. Then ending things off with athletics, South Africa's middle distance runner Alroy Galant says that he welcomes bonus incentives introduced by Stillwater for this year's edition of the ABSA Run Your City 10-kilometer series in the men's division. Surpassing the 27-minute mark will earn athletes a substantial reward of 200,000 rands. Similarly, female participants stand to gain 200,000 rands for breaking the 30-minute and the 23-second barriers.
What do I think of the athletes' incentives? The ABSA Runner Series incentive serves as a motivation for us as athletes, especially referring to our local athletes to push ourselves harder and improve our performances. It also acts as a reward for hard work and dedication. And then lastly, it attracts top talent of experienced athletes or runners to the ABSA Run Your City series, leading to more exciting and competitive 10-kilometer races.
On that note, it's a wrap from us for now. I'll have more in the next hour. For SAFM Sport, I'm Dumin Kapele.
Load shedding is a controlled way to balance the supply and demand of electricity on the power grid and to prevent a blackout. Eskom and government are working hard to solve the energy crisis and improve power generation capacity. If we all use only what we need, we could help reduce demand on the network and ultimately end load shedding together. Government and Eskom working hard to reduce and ultimately end load shedding.
USM Alger want to finish their Group A matters on a high note, while Matsatsansa Pitori target an away victory to travel back to Mzansi's capital city
with pride. This is the CAF Confederation Cup.
Experience the beauty of African football. USM Alger FC takes on Supersport United FC on Sunday, 3 March at 9 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com.
Hashtag We Love It Here.
Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
You are listening to Aldrin Sampear on SAFM.
Let's take your voice notes on 0614-104-107, and you can also drop me a call on 086-000-2032 and an X at Aldrin Sampear. When we come back, we're in conversation with Ria Pierra, the former National Police Commissioner and also the CEO of a Safer South Africa Foundation, as we look at the question around violence in schools and how to quell violence in schools. So that's the conversation they'll be having. And then at 10 to 4, we speak to Tebe Ikalafeng, founder and chairman of a Brand Leadership Group, We look at the question around reputational harm, the reputational risk that Vodacom could suffer because of this case between itself as well as its former employee, Nkosana Makate. Now, Vodacom has announced early this morning that they will petition the Constitutional Court to overturn the SCA judgment, the recent SCA judgment, which was in favor of Makate. And I'm also asking you this afternoon, has this case swayed how you perceive brand Vodacom, the brand in its entirety? It is a massive company. I'm going to quickly see if I can get the market cap of the company. It's one of the biggest network providers on the continent as well. Someone was actually saying, yeah, if I leave Vodacom, where do I go to? And does that dominance of Vodacom also play an influence in how the company is litigating? And another question that I have is, what are the shareholders of Vodacom saying about how the CEO, Shamil, is handling this matter?
Good afternoon, Aldrin. With regards to this Vodacom situation and everything like that, first of all, if you're an employee, any suggestions you don't get paid for, but they can give you some sort of gratuity or whatever it is. Secondly, that idea that he had and everything is worthless unless you have an infrastructure like Vodacom's. Thirdly, Mark Shuttleworth invented and developed and built a whole very signed product and everything and sold that for R1 billion or whatever the case may be. Now suddenly this guy wants, for an idea that cost him nothing, he wants billions of rands. I don't think so.
Well, my take on it is that if I come up with an idea is an idea. We are not equal when it comes to being creatively inclined. Somebody comes up with an idea, and the idea is worth generating millions or billions of rands for the company, or even for myself. If it's my idea and I'm running it in my company, surely I must be compensated. I must be compensated for that. Just because an idea comes out of a person's own inquisitive mind doesn't mean that the person need not be compensated for it. Surely I don't think that you believe that that is the case. Also, you need to ask yourself, why do you believe this particular idea does not deserve compensation?
Hi, Aldrin and team. On the Vodacom matter, even if we wanted to do something, the problem in South Africa is that the competition, there's so little competition in South Africa. I can count the network, cell phone network providers with one hand and come up with change. And so even if I wanted to leave Vodacom, where do I go? And then secondly, the way in which the contracts are structured, to try and terminate my contract because of how Vodacom treated their employee, doesn't do me any good, doesn't benefit me any good. Instead, it will inconvenience me because now I have to pay because I terminated. And to try and change a cell phone provider, it's a very inconvenient exercise. So no, I'm not gonna do anything about it. The guy must fight his own battles.
Okay. What about the question around the solidarity? The market cap of Vodacom, 195 billion rand. That is the market cap. Let's go to Paul, who's joining us from Mangaung. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Paul. Okay, we seem to have lost Paul. Let's take a few voice notes and then let's move over to the former police commissioner, Ria Pierre.
Hi, Aldrin. This cancel culture is really getting out of hand, and I think people need to think twice before they just go ahead and cancel someone or something. Like in this Makato versus Vodacom case, if subscribers decide to cancel Vodacom, they'll just be, strengthening Vodacom's case for not being in a good financial position to pay what Makato requires. Yeah, so it's a classic case of cutting the nose to spite the face. Thanks, Farai.
Farai, why do you call it cancel culture? In 1959, when you had the South African Congress of Trade Unions pushing for a boycott, the potato boycott, was that also cancel culture?
I'm very happy that this case has been finally solved. The suspects are being arrested, and the strategy that the police used is an effective one. You arrest one suspect, you don't charge for the main charge, which is murder of AKA and his friend. By doing so, they don't alert the remaining one that are not being arrested, because they were going to hide themselves or they're going to be on the run. If they made an announcement that one suspect has been arrested for a murder, aka murder, the remaining ones will be running away or hiding themselves. So it's a good strategy, really. I applaud the police for doing that.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
0614-104-107 in conversation next with Ria Piecha, former National Police Commissioner and also the CEO of a Safer South Africa Foundation. She's now joining us on the line. So school violence has become an urgent and pervasive concern in South Africa, impacting the safety and well-being of students as well as educators. Recent incidents of shooting, rape as well as gangsterism and bullying at schools are a major concern. According to former SAPSA National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha, authorities need to prioritize safety of children and initiate a transformative process that not only curtails the immediate threats but also fosters an environment conducive to the holistic development of the future leaders. She now joins us on the line. Mepiera, good afternoon and thank you so much for making time for us.
Again, good afternoon to all the listeners.
How bad is the situation? And also considering that we already have a school safety program that is in place that has been adopted by the Basic Education Department.
You know, Aldrin, you would have noticed that for many years, not even SAPS in the aspect had a category for crimes in educational institutions. This has become so serious that every time they announce their statistics, they have a category for that. You know, in just this last quarter, the reports that were given is that there were 61 rapes in educational institutions, and you would be interested to know that a majority of those were not in your tertiary institutions, they were in high school. There were 7 murders that took place in educational institutions. There were 291 assault GBH cases. And that's just a quarter. So clearly, the school shows that it is a microcosm of the society that they are established in. So the pervasive crime that we are all concerned about is finding itself into school. So it's a matter that we should all be settled with as a society and not leave it to maybe one sector. We all need to have all hands on deck to say, what little bit can we do to assist in this situation?
What's the answer? Some people have said that maybe there should be more surveillance at schools. Do you bring in metal detectors? But do you really want such an environment in a place of learning, teaching and learning?
I think we should be talking about a blend of interventions, if I may put it. A blend of interventions. The school has a role, the parent has a role, the community has a role, the security cluster has a role, the civil society NGOs have a role. So we must just find a multiplicity of interventions to come into school. For instance, if I'm talking about what we are doing with Safer South Africa Foundation. A Safer South Africa Foundation, we are using, education and awareness to reach out to learners in schools. And we're not alone. We're working with the entire security cluster, starting from the police, traffic, the National Prosecuting Authority, the magistrates, the Correctional Service, the Human Rights Commission, the Banking Association, and many other, NGOs and social development here and there. And what we are doing is that we create a platform, we work with the Department of Education to ensure that these very security cluster officials have an opportunity to educate and teach our children about their responsibilities, their respect for the law, the role they have as citizens, because children are citizens too, of reporting. We empower them to make positive choices. We expose them, to the functioning of the court. We spend, for instance, a day in court to see a juvenile case taking place because we're targeting the attitudes, we're targeting the behavior. And if we are able to turn those around together, all of us were able to do more. We expose them to experiential visits, for instance, to the correctional service, so that we start changing the attitudes around the fact that that's not a place to be in. And when they are there, they find juvenile inmates who are there to address them, to say, you are lucky somebody is talking to you. I am here. I didn't have the opportunity. And we also target things like deepening conversations around issues of crime prevention by looking at youth thought leadership, because we let them write. We have debates that they engage in. We have dialogues that they engage in. And we do it not only in schools. We are now starting to work with partners who are saying, let's also use the same program to work with youth out of school. And we found that to be very, 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 very beneficial. And you are not short of people who are young people who are willing to be involved, to be active, to be ambassadors, to go to the assembly, to share with others what they have learned. So that's what we're using: education, awareness, involvement, and participation of the young ones in the program.
Thank you so much for your time, Maria Pierre, as the former police commissioner and CEO of Safer South Africa Foundation. What do you think the answer is to deal with violence in schools?
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da-da. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
ES Tunis is adamant a win is non-negotiable in front of their home fans against the Sudanese Giants. Meanwhile, Al Hilal is inspired that the best conclusion of the group stage is to triumph on foreign ground.
This is the CAF Champions League. Witness Africa's beautiful game.
ES Tunis clashes with Al Hilal on Saturday 2 March at 9 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
You are listening to Aldrin Sampear on SAFM.
0614-104-107, and you can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear. In conversation next with Tebe Ikalafeng, founder and chairman of Brand Africa. Vodacom has now confirmed that it has lodged its application for leave to appeal the Please Call Me judgment and order to the Constitutional Court of South Africa. Vodacom's released a statement saying that this case is having an impact on both Vodacom South Africa and Vodacom Group, as well as the attractiveness of South Africa as an investment destination. It would negatively impact the employees, shareholders, and Vodacom's contribution to public finances. It will also have an impact on the network investment coverage and social programs. Tebe Kalafeng is now joining us on the line. Tebe, good afternoon, and thank you so much for making time for us.
Absolute pleasure. Good afternoon, Aldrin.
Yeah. Considering how long this matter has been going on for, do you think
18 years.
18 years, close to 2 decades. Considering how long this matter has been going on for, do you think that a company as big as Vodacom would sit down and ask themselves if there are any reputational risks in pursuing this particular matter in the manner which they are pursuing?
Well, I think if you speak about what they said in a statement about the attractiveness of South Africa, or even the attractiveness of Vodacom as a place to work for, I think if I were Vodacom, I would have actually settled this much earlier. It's actually become progressively more expensive every year, because you remember it was like half the value 10 years ago. But they've been appealing this. But I would have settled this long time ago for one important reason, or for one important outcome. I would have told a story about Vodacom or South Africa as a country which respects and appreciates ingenuity from staff or from employees or from citizens. I think we would have told a very good story from that end. So rather than looking at it negatively as something that impacts its social programs or reputation, I don't think really it's going to affect South Africa's global reputation. Because I don't think it's got anything to do with that.
Okay, so you don't think it would have an impact on how the consumer also sees the brand Vodacom or perceives the brand Vodacom?
From the consumer perspective, the consumer may, because remember, the consumer at the end of the day is potentially an employee of Vodacom. So from a perception perspective, the consumer may look at it as, well, this is a company I may not want to work for because they do not appreciate employees, not even just an employee, because anybody else who comes up with an idea that will not be respected or not be compensated for fairly. Because I think the key question here is fair compensation rather than any compensation at all.
What would you say some of the lessons should be, even for other companies? What is it that they should draw out of this particular litigation?
Very important a lesson out of this. I mean, one of the things that we did in IP law is try and understand how you look at ideas generated by employees. So in this instance, as we all know, Makate was not in the product development part of the business. He was very clear up front in writing that should I disclose my idea, will I get compensated for it? So I think the lesson for other organizations now, or maybe even 20 years earlier when this started, is to say, look at your employment contracts very, very clearly. Because in this instance, if I were Vodacom or any other organization, not just Vodacom actually, by the way, the letter of employment perhaps should say, if you come up with an idea within the context of what we do as a business, you should see the idea to us should you disclose it. If you don't disclose it, you can do whatever you want with it. But should you disclose it and hand it over to us, it becomes a property of the organization. I mean, that's very, very bright, if you will, a broad brushstroke of it. Of course, it will be challenged because somebody is going to say, but I am not in that space. You employed me as a lawyer or a finance guy and not necessarily in your product development. But I think irrespective, I'll take my chances if I'm an organization. I'll make sure that it becomes part of the employment contract, that any idea within the context of what we do for a business is part of our business and is part of our ideas, should you disclose and cede it to us.
Yeah. So Vodacom at some point also spoke about them compensating their employees who come up with initiatives, but there was a cap to it. But it seems that the money, of course, that Makate now wants goes far beyond that as well.
But this idea of compensating employees across the organization perhaps was not policy at the time when Makate came. So you cannot look at this retrospectively. It may be something that came afterwards. Of course, it's fair to do that. I mean, companies such as 3M are globally known and have built their reputation on the idea of employees generating ideas which help the organization. If you look at the Post-it sticker, for example, that was generated by an employee within the 3M organization, who then says, here's an idea to put your notes, and was fairly compensated for it. So, or fairly as in within the guidelines that organization had established. That is perhaps the second lesson for organizations, by the way, that you should be looking at within your policies and say, how do I incentivize employees to come up with ideas which, in this instance of Vodacom, has generated over 200 billion?
Thank you so much for your time. Tebe Galafeng, founder and chairman of Brand Africa. So again, what do you make of this particular case, and does it have an impact at all in how you perceive a brand of Vodacom? It's a minute after 4 o'clock. Time for the news.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Top stories for this hour. The National Defence Force finds irregularities in its books, and the DA seeks leave to appeal the cadre deployment ruling. Good afternoon, I'm Eva Chipa. The National Defence Force says it has discovered that at least 22 people who are not on its books were called by the Uzumvubu Regiment to quell unrest in KwaZulu-Natal in 2021. Billions of rands in damage and losses were caused during the looting and violence of July 2021. The department says investigations carried out by the Human Resources Division has found a number of other irregularities with how the call-up was conducted. There was an outcry at the time following reports that the called-up members were placed in a camp lacking decent ablution facilities, preparations, as well as sleeping arrangements. Brigadier General Joseph Manyata explains.
There are personnel who reported alleging that they were also soldiers. And according to the audit, we realized that approximately 22 of them were never in the Department of Defense before, or have never integrated. So it means these members will have to be enlisted as an auxiliary service, which is the same system which was used during COVID-19. And in order to create an enforcement mechanism for payments, we will require their ID numbers or for the tax numbers.
The DA has filed papers in the High Court in Pretoria seeking leave to appeal the full bench judgment that dismissed with costs its bid to have the policy of cadre deployment declared unconstitutional. The official opposition suffered a blow when the High Court found, among other things, that the DA came to the court with a case built on speculation and that it failed to make a valid constitutional attack against the policy. Kenny Mapanga reports.
In papers, the DA seeks leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal on grounds of 1. Reasonable prospects that the SCA will reach a different conclusion. Lastly, the DA submits that there are compelling reasons, such as the matter raises questions of constitutional law that are of public importance, and that the judgment is inconsistent with the approach in the Maboti case, which regarded political interference as quote-unquote unwarranted. Kenny Mapanga, SABC News, Johannesburg.
In other news, the Muretele Magistrate Court in the Northwest sentenced a man to 15 years in prison with 5 years suspended for 5 years for murdering his girlfriend. NPA spokesperson Henry Mamotame says Nkateko Masha's conviction follows an incident that occurred in 2021 in Stinkwater near Muretele, where he confronted his girlfriend at his home. Mamotame adds that Masha accused her of cheating after seeing pictures on Facebook and then stabbed her to death with a knife while she was asleep.
We believe the sentence is befitting to the offence committed, and we also agree with the court that Masha is a candidate for rehabilitation, and a jail term imposed on him will offer him time to be rehabilitated at the correctional service facility where he will be kept. We further hope that the family of the deceased will receive closure after the loss of their loved one in the hands of Masha.
And lastly, police have arrested 3 men between the ages of 32 and 34 at Beaufort West in the Karoo, where they were allegedly on the way to the Eastern Cape to commit a murder. Police spokesperson FC van Wyk says the men face charges of possession of unlicensed firearms, the illegal possession of ammunition, and the possession of suspected stolen property.
The 3 male occupants in the vehicle were searched, upon which they found 3 9mm firearms with 34 rounds of ammunition. Further investigations revealed that the firearms was reported stolen in Claremont and Milnerton during July 2010 and November 2023 respectively. The Nissan Navara double cab, which is suspected to be stolen, was handed in as an exhibit pending further investigations. Once charged, the suspects will appear in the Beaufort West Magistrates Court.
Recapping the top story for this hour, the DA has filed papers in the High Court in Pretoria seeking leave to appeal the full bench judgment that dismissed with costs its bid to have the policy of cadre deployment declared unconstitutional. I'll be back at the bottom of the hour for SFM News. I'm Eva Chipa.
Coming up in your sports this hour, Van Dijk aims to improve the netball Proteas ranking in the world, and Gompela pleads with SAFCA not to only focus on politics. I'll have more on this and other sports stories at 4:30.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide, leading the conversation.
ES Tunis is adamant a win is non-negotiable in front of their home fans against the Sudanese Giants. Meanwhile, Al Hilal is inspired that the best conclusion of the group stage is to triumph on foreign ground.
This is the CAF Champions League. Witness Africa's beautiful game.
ES Tunis clashes with Al Hilal on Saturday 2 March at 9 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
The Market Update, Monday to Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m.
Want to stay ahead of the financial game? Join us tonight from 6 to 7 p.m. for an insightful journey through the day's market developments, financial updates, and investment news. Tune in for your daily dose of financial intelligence as we navigate the twists and turns of the financial landscape with expert insights. Only on the SAFM Market Update.
SAFM Market Update with Jimmy Mayaha. SAFM supports a litter-free South Africa. Play your part in keeping our surroundings and environment clean. SAFM, leading the conversation. Hashtag SAFMBTH.
It is 8 minutes after 4 o'clock. Coming up on the show in this hour, we speak to the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Service, Edward Kiswetter, who has now been reappointed by the President, his contract has been extended for an additional 2 years. So we'll be speaking to him about that, and also some of the innovation that SARS is relying on to recover some money from taxpayers. And then at 4:20, we speak to Chris Campbell, who is the CEO of Consulting Engineers of South Africa, that are warning that South Africa cannot afford to have a new public procurement bill signed into law. That conversation is coming up just after 20 past 4 or at 20 past 4. And then at 4:45, we speak to Baba Mtetwa, our football commentator. He's joining us at 4:45 to speak about his competition that he is running, looking for the next brilliant sports commentator that is going to come out of South Africa. It is called Nai Levois. So if you are somebody who's interested in becoming a commentator, a sports commentator, listen in at 4:45. We'll give you more details around how you can enter the competition and maybe get a bit of motivation as well from Babu Mtetwa. So that conversation is coming up at 4:45. 0614-104-107. You can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear, and our studio line is 086-000-2032.
SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
10 past 4. 10 past 4.
This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
Indeed, it is 10 past 4, and we're in conversation next with the SARS Commissioner, Edward Kisweta. This week, the presidency released a statement announcing the 2-year extension of a tenure to the Commissioner of South Africa's Revenue Services, that is Edward Kisweta. This move was made by President Cyril Ramaphosa to ensure stability, as Kisweta appointed his deputy commissioners in the last 2 years of his tenure. To share more about the role we will be taking in this extended tenure, we speak to the Commissioner who's joining us on the line. Commissioner, good afternoon, and thank you so much for making time for us. Okay, we seem to have lost the Commissioner there. We're going to try and see if we can re-establish that line. Commissioner, let's try again. Good afternoon. Can you hear us?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for making time for us. What does this extension mean for you, considering the role that you had played at SARS?
What does it mean for me? Well, first of all, it means I have to park my wonderful ideas about retirement and spending more time with family. But seriously, Aldrin, you will recall after my appointment in May 2019, the state of SARS was really undesirable. It had really suffered from the damage of state capture, and my personal assessment really gave me the enormity of the scope of work that was required. No sooner had we clarified a strategic path and intent, 10 months later we went bang into COVID, and that had all kinds of implications, firstly for the progress we could make, the implementation and rollout of the plans. The unintended consequences of that was our economy went in decline, government resources went in decline, SARS's funding was directly affected. And so a lot of that work had to be repaced. A very important stream of work was also building leadership bench strength. Because ultimately, leadership in an institution is not just about one individual, it's about strengthening the entire leadership bench. So any CEO will tell you that it takes about 5 to 10 years to implement a solid strategy. And given the fact that we were slowed down, I personally, when the president then asked me whether I would consider staying on to allow for a more orderly transition, I took into account the fact that in any case we had more work to be done, and those 2 years would allow us to embed the strategic journey we had started, and in fact in many ways to step it up, but also to continue the work that I commenced in 2020 to ensure that there's a strong, high, competent, professional, but also a leadership system with integrity. And then if that work is done, we would be able to be more confident about sustaining the momentum at SARS. This is also an election year. It has other administrational, transitional issues. And the one institution that you cannot afford to go into any form of instability, however triggered, is an institution such as SARS.
If you look at the Nugent Commission's report and also the recommendations that have been made there, one of them, for instance, is that SARS must take steps to restore the cordial relations that formerly existed with other state institutions, including the NPA, the Financial Intelligence Center, the Auditor General, National Treasury, and develop protocols for interaction with the National Treasury. Would you say that during this tenure you have been able to achieve that?
We've made significant progress in that regard. I have very cordial relationships with the heads of all of the other agencies. We can pick up the phone, we meet when we need to. And so from that perspective, I don't think there are any barriers that permit or that constrain our working requirement. The challenge we all face, though, is that all of our institutions are still struggling with being appropriately capacitated. If you look at the NPA, the Hawks, they will all make the same moan that I do, which is we are underfunded, and the work we do is complex, complicated, needs time, needs resources, and we don't always have adequate resources. And I can give you examples of where we can do so much more if we were better resourced. The second thing is collaboration is hard. The minute you have more than one agency, each having its own mandate, and our mandate in government isn't always aligned. And sometimes the key performance indicators work against each other. And so we need a whole of government approach to say, how do we cooperate better, especially when there is no friction between the heads, but there's institutional inertia. So, for example, when SARS completes a investigation of a tax civil offense where there's also crime, we are then in the hands of the hawks, in the hands of the NPA, who may have their own priorities, and that interdependency doesn't always work as well as we want it to work.
Would you say that that relationship or this relationship that you're speaking about has also played a role in matters, for instance, in relation to SASFIN? Have you spoken to the Financial Intelligence Center, for instance, with regards to your investigation there?
Let me not single out one taxpayer. The SASFIN matter is in the public domain, not because we have put it there, but because the company quite rightly had to put out a SENS announcement after we had issued them with a summons. So now it's in the public domain. That will follow due process, and we will work with the other institutions like the FIC and other institutions where we require further investigation and, if necessary, any further prosecution. But the principle that you refer to is quite important, that we cannot do our work. In this particular example, we have a functionality, a division in SARS that looks at crime, commercial and tax crime, where there is syndication. In other words, it's more than one party. Often it's offshore, it's onshore, it requires the understanding of the entire value chain, but also any party who potentially, wittingly or unwittingly, can enable crime. When it gets to banks have a reporting requirement when there is a suspicious or reportable transaction as defined in law. When banks merely have a tick-the-box compliance approach, then that's not enough. Banks cannot claim plausible deniability because they have not followed a comprehensive risk analysis. I mean, the elephant in the room, Aldrin, is even crooks and criminals are very often good clients of banks, very profitable clients of banks. So the banks are caught between a rock and a hard place where, sometimes it's better for them to just turn a blind eye or not to kick the can because there's a risk of... Now, they would obviously be annoyed at me even saying that, but I cannot exclude the possibility in instances where banks have done tick-the-box compliance that they could have done more. The duty of care is not just about protecting the interest of a single client, it's protecting firstly the systemic risk to the banking institution, the financial sector, and importantly, the erosion of the social fiber when crime is enabled and progress. In South Africa, we have a significant crime. The entire state capture was enabled by international businesses, South African businesses, banks, advisors, consultants, auditors. None of them can walk away and plead innocence.
Do you think there needs to be further tightening of the KYC, Know Your Customer legislation, or do you think it's appropriate currently and all you need is that there needs to be cooperation from the banks?
A couple of things, Aldo. Let me speak to the hard issues first. It's not just about policy and regulation. It's about our capacity to enforce it. Any policy or regulation is only as good as enforcement. If you give your kids a bedtime rule and you never enforce it, then they're going to ignore it, right? So sometimes we've let ourselves down when we are not able to enforce the very rules and regulations. And in that instance, more regulations will not necessarily help. And very often more regulations can be counterintuitive and counterproductive. The soft issue is the culture and the ethos of running businesses beyond reproach and with integrity and not wittingly, unwittingly, and sometimes by omission, more than commission, stand by and watch crime for 10 years, and even beyond the 10 years, because we haven't quite got rid of all of the corruption. There are active players who are at the scene of the crime, and you have to ask, could we as a society have done more? And very often we have to come to the conclusion, we did not do enough.
Commissioner, just a final one. Again, going back to the Nugent Commission, one of the other recommendations that was made there was in terms of litigation. It is recommended that SARS take steps to recover from the former commissioner legal costs and expenses incurred by SARS for litigation. Have you completed that?
Which one specifically, Aldrin?
This is now the recommendation from the Nugent Commission. This is now the legal cost of the former commissioner, your predecessor. Have you recovered all of the legal costs that have been incurred by SARS?
Aldrin, we have done everything we could in terms of all affected parties, which would include Bain and other companies. It would include former employees of SARS. And at some stage, we then hand those, now that's the point I made earlier, we then hand over these matters to the Hawks, to the SAPS, and to the NPA. And in each of these regards, my own assessment is we've not made enough progress. And so some of these matters are not yet closed from a whole of government approach.
Thank you so much for your time. That is the commissioner. That is the South African Revenue Service Commissioner, SARS Commissioner Edward Kisweta, on the extension of his tenure as the Commissioner of SARS by 2 years, of course announced by the Presidency, and also relating to other matters, including that of SASFIN, that are going to court to challenge the argument that have been put forward by SARS in terms of the money that is owed to SARS. And SARS is arguing that actually SASFIN has a duty also to report any suspicious activity. 0614-104-107, and you can drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear.
This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
Okay, let's quickly go to Paul. Paul is joining us from Mangaung. Good afternoon.
How are you, sir?
I'm well. Thanks, Paul. You can go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Aldrin, I want to comment about Vodacom. The Vodacom issue, this gentleman, what's his name? The one who won the court about the political meeting?
Nkosana
did win the case, correct? And then those people, they did accept to pay millions. So immediately when you accept to pay millions, that is a guiltiness. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a lawyer, but immediately when you reach that agreement that okay, I understand it, I have to pay so much, at least it means that you are guilty. So there's no way this gentleman they will give him billions because he's a black person. You heard the other commentator say that Shuttleworth, he did create such a thing. He sold the idea for billions. So what's the difference of Shuttleworth and this guy? I don't see the difference. Because nowadays, corporate companies, they say that if you look like money, or you smell like money, and if you are money, we can hire you. So this gentleman of Vodacom, he was money himself.
Okay.
I don't know if you get my point.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Paul there from Mangaung. You look like money, you smell like money, you are money.
This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
Good afternoon, Aldrin and fellow listeners. I'm very proud of SAPS for finally getting somewhere. And I must say, on face value, this does not look like a Senzo Meiwa murder case situation where arrests are just being made for arrest's sake and the case is just going to be going a loop. Looks like they have something, but you know what I would love, because of all the contract killing cases that I've heard in South Africa. It's rare that you get the mastermind. These guys can be convicted, like with the Botswana case. They got convicted, but who is the mastermind? If they can just after finding them guilty, give them an incentive enough to deter this, masterminds are the ones who need to be doing 25 years in prison, and then maybe we'll get rid of this Nkabi culture in our community. Thank you.
#SAFMBTH.
We're in conversation next with Chris Campbell, who is the CEO of the Consulting Engineers South Africa, which has warned South Africa cannot afford to have a new public procurement bill signed into law in its current form because it will hinder rather than support the infrastructure delivery challenges facing the country. Chris, good afternoon. Thank you so much for making time for us. What are those challenges that you think this bill brings for?
Good afternoon, Aldrin, and good afternoon to your challengers. Sorry for that.
Yeah, I accept the challenge. I accept the challenge.
It's Freudian slip. I think, very simply put, this is a procurement bill, and, with infrastructure and the dire state in which our infrastructure is, there are but literally only two mentions of infrastructure in a bill of this nature, whereas there should have been more deliberate emphasis on expenditure and procurement related to infrastructure and other strategic assets. So, one wonders, whether enough thought has gone into so that we can be more deliberate in how we intend getting value for money in our infrastructure development efforts. And that, I believe, would be a significant step and change in the right direction, because for too long, people see infrastructure as just a tender. It's an opportunity to, submit a tender and somebody may get it. And most often, there's the assumption that I win this tender, it's like ballpoint pens, and it gets treated like ballpoint pens, which the quality of which and the longevity of which doesn't really matter too much. Whereas in infrastructure, this is a 30, 40-year, even longer sometimes investment. So your approach to that has to be deliberately and completely different to that which you're using for tea, coffee, and ballpoint pens. Now, one may argue that you can put this in the regulations because that's the how-to, but there's nothing wrong with being even more explicit in your primary legislation about some of the really big ticket items that we do pursue and hope to get, and even our minister in his budget speech spoke about value for money out of.
Sure, Chris, but I'm trying to get to what your problem is with the bill. Which clause is it that you have a concern over?
So the problem with the bill is that it's not explicit enough. It has tended to be too many aspects of insufficiently detailed principles and wording, which are open to so much interpretation that one wonders how exactly are we meant to interpret this, and the entities for which it is meant to provide direction, that being local government, your PFMA compliant SOEs and provincial government. It's not clear. So the reality is, should this bill go forward, there's still going to be so much confusion because it doesn't give the requisite, even in principle, the direction that we should be going in. What is the core principle around our procurement pursuits, over and above just what is contained in Section 2171 in the Constitution, and the other Section 2172 and 3. I think there's neighboring countries have similar legislation, and there they've even been deliberate in that legislation talking about when is the price deemed to be too low and what would be the consequences of those hoping to, simply win bids when they're completely undercutting, because there's a consequence to that.
Because sometimes what also happens is that they would give an estimate around how much it is that they will be charging for a certain project, and then later on, once they're busy with the project, then all of a sudden the costs then start ballooning, and now they're writing to the various departments of finance to say that more money is needed for the project. Thank you so much for your time. Chris Campbell is the CEO of Consulting Engineers South Africa.
In news making headlines, the Multi-Party Charter, or MPC, says getting rid of the electricity minister, headed by Jose Ntorama, will be one of its key priorities should it be elected into government after the 2024 elections. The MPC has held a press briefing outside the Calvin Power Station in Kempton Park, where it shared its plans in ending load shedding. In other news, the National Defence Force says it has discovered that at least 22 people who are not on its books were called up by the Umzimvubu regiment to quell unrest in KZN in 2021. Billions of rands in damage and losses were caused by the looting and violence. And lastly, the late reporting of crimes by alleged rape victims in the Bishop Stephen Bafana Zondo's rape case remains under the spotlight at the High Court in Pretoria. Zondo, who is the leader of the Rivers of Living Waters Church, faces multiple rape charges relating to the alleged rape of female congregants in his church between 2013 and 2018. Greg Gous will be back at the top of the hour with more news. For SFM News, good afternoon. I'm Eva Chipa.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Just south of Durban, some very heavy backlog going on along the Prospector and Isipingo routes. We had the striking and protesting municipal workers dump a load of sand on the N2 of Prospector earlier today. The road was closed and reopened, but closed again. There's a big backlog coming through from Tweedy Hill. If you're leaving Amanzam Todi, there's a very heavy queue on the N2, and there's all sorts of congestion. Those factories and workshops empty out after a day at work, and local routes like Joyner and Prospector Road and the N2 bridge, it's all very, very significantly queued up through there. A bit of traffic today going out of Durban on the N3, Pavilion through towards Paradise Valley through the roadworks. Joburg's Mike 1, worth a mention. There's some traffic there between Houghton and the N1 Buccleuch interchange today. And Cape Town, the Huguenot Tunnel is being closed due to a fire along the N1 corridor, so there's quite a backlog of traffic on the Paarl side and coming in from the Rawsonville, Worcester side as well, as motorists queue up into the closure. And there's been a crash on the N2 near the airport runway. It's on the N2 inbound, so coming through from Khayelitsha. You're driving into that in a queue and heading out of town, having a look. That's busy on your way to Khayelitsha as well. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sports with Duming Khapele.
In your sports this hour, newly appointed netball Proteas coach Jenny van Dijk says that one of her main mandates is to help improve the team's ranking in the world. Van Dijk was unveiled as the new head coach of the SA netball national team on a 4-year contract. South Africa are currently ranked 5th in the world and top the rankings in Africa.
Targets. Look, there's still a lot that we need to discuss. Obviously, we need to remain first in Africa. I think there's a little bit of a misconception sometimes. We are first in Africa, even though we have missed 1 or 2 opportunities to win in crucial matches. But yes, obviously, we want to keep that. We have a bunch of national coaches and players over the years that has kept up that position for us in ranking as well. So that is obviously something we want to work on. And we also want to try and improve our ranking. It's easier said than done. You really need to be meticulous in it, but the whole idea is to get our squad to really be performing and be highly competitive. The thing is, once we get them to be in a position where they're highly competitive and we know that they can win, they all know they can win. So we just need to stay in it for the entire game, and then from there we know we can actually perform.
In football, former Morocco Swallows head coach Steve Rombella is pleading with the South African Football Coaches Association to play a more prominent role in football coaching matters in the country and not only focus on politics. Looking back at the recent situation at his former club, Rombella says that it was not only players who were affected by the off-field administrative issues, but the coaches too. He says as the South African Football Players Union was playing its role in solving the situation, he started thinking about the whereabouts of SAFCA.
Listen, that's no-brainer. That's no-brainer. You know, when there were issues even at my club, Morocco Solos, when the players chipped in, I was looking at things and saying, okay, the players' union is moving in to try to solve the impasse and assist the club resolve the matter and all that. But we forgot that there were a group of coaches and technicians in there. And I was saying at the back of my mind, I wonder where's the coaches' union? If you have players' union, where's the coaches' union? But now, the association of coaches must not only be there for political reasons and agendas.
Elsewhere, Japan are through to the Paris Olympic women's football competition with a hard-fought 2-1 win over North Korea in today's qualifying second leg. The two sides drew goalless in Saturday's first leg on a neutral ground, and Saudi Arabia setting up a winner-takes-all showdown for one of the two Asian berths at the Games. In tennis, Great Britain's Andy Murray hopes to compete at another Olympic Games before he retires. The 36-year-old suggested on Monday that he may only have a few months left in his playing career. And the three-time Grand Slam champion ranks his gold medal from 2012 when he defeated Roger Federer in the final as the top achievement in his career. Ending things off with rugby, the Sharks have signed Jordan Hendrickse, who makes a move from the Lions in Johannesburg. Hendrickse will join at the beginning of the 2024-25 season, and it's more or less a homecoming of sorts for Hendrickse, who went to school at Durban's Glenwood High with his brother Jaden, who has been at the Sharks since 2020 and is now a World Cup winner with the Springboks. The Sharks are currently rock bottom at the United Rugby Championship table and are next in action when they take on the Lions at Ellis Park this Saturday. With that said, it's a wrap from my side. For SAFM Sport, I'm Dumin Kapele.
The Portfolio Committee on Public Works and Roads Community Safety and Transport Management will conduct a public hearing on Marine Pollution Amendment Bill and Transport Appeal Tribunal Amendment Bill on the 29th of February 2024 at Madiboho Community Hall in Madiboho, Maka Mudrimulema District, Ching Community Hall Extension 4 in Fennesdorp, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, Hamariba Tribal Hall in Morukwenya, Dr. Ruth Sohomosi Mumpati, Letabile Community Hall in Letabile, Buchanala District. All hearing starts at 10 in the morning.
SAFM supports a litter-free South Africa. Play your part in keeping our surroundings and environment clean. SAFM, leading the conversation.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
And time for a market update with Markwe Masilela, Chief Investment Officer at Markwe Fund Managers. Markwe, good afternoon. Welcome to the show. So let's look at cash build as well as Huli's interims.
Afternoon to you, Adrian, and to your listeners. Remember, Cash Build, they are selling directly to cash-paying customers through their 321 chain stores, but the trading conditions expected to remain challenging, and mainly because of the volatile macroeconomic conditions, depressed consumer spending, high operating cost, and also competition. Revenue up only 2%, and the gross profit margin is down 2.3%, sitting at 24.7%. And their profits as headline earnings per share down to 20%, and dividends are down 19%. Woolies, unfortunately, market participants are not impressed at all. The share price is down 7.5%. And remember, the results are not directly comparable to that of the prior period, as the prior period included David Jones, and performance again was impacted by challenging macroeconomic backdrops, given the sustained effect of interest rate increases and higher living costs, and that negatively impacted footfall, resulting in greater than expected pullback when it comes to discretionary spending, and that's both in South Africa and Australia. And in South Africa, load shedding, ports issues, and avian flu exacerbated the situation. Turnover was up 5.1%, with food continuing to deliver solid growth, reinforcing its strength and resilience and the trust customers have in their brand, and the fashion, beauty and home making steady progress, however impacted by poor availability, and that is due in part to the late arrival of certain summer ranges because of port issues. And the financial services book is up 4.9%. 1%, and that was driven by growth when it comes to new accounts and credit card advances. And Country Road Group trading conditions in Australia and New Zealand have fallen further. Profits as headline earnings per share down 31%, and the interim dividend is down 6.6%.
And tell us about local and international market developments.
Markets are struggling. They're eyeing, for data. This is the second half of the week. There are data that will help determine the path of interest rates, and investors are holding back from making big bets, and that's ahead of that data release. And market participants are also contending with an erosion when it comes to expectations for how much central bankers will lower rates, and others are starting to question the soft landing view as consumer spending starts to feel the pressure. Remember, Aldrin, that most developed economies, including ours, are mainly driven by consumer demand, and we saw the US Q4 GDP expanding at a slightly slower rate, and the markets have seen that as an event that is not having an impact for now. And oil prices are up as the prospect of delays to US interest rate cuts and a jump in US crude inventories were unfortunately offset by a boost when it comes to a potential extension to OPEC Plus supply cuts. Brent crude is up 0.7% at $82 a barrel, and gold is at the mercy of a dollar rebound, but traders are eyeing the key data tomorrow, which will shape investors' view on the timing of rate cuts. We see the yellow metal is up 0.2% at 2,034, and then platinum is down 1% at 879. Again, it's worth noting that Bitcoin jumped over $60,000 for the first time since November 2021. We're talking just over 1.1 million rands, and the Dow is down 0.5%, S&P is down 0.3%, the DAX is up 0.1%, FTSE down 0.6%, CAC is flat with the JSE down 1.2%, with the resources down 2%, industrials down 1%, financials down 0.8%, and the rand is 19.20 to the US dollar, 24.27 to the pound, and 20.78 to the euro.
Thank you so much. That's Markwe Masilela, Chief Investment Officer at Markwe Fund Managers. We're taking your calls on 086 000 2032 and your voice notes on 0614 104 107. Just another reminder, in the next few minutes, we'll be in conversation with football commentator Babu Mtetwa on his new competition, trying to find the next pristine voice for sports commentating. Naile voice competition that he's launching. So he'll be telling us more about that. If you are interested, do dial in. Any questions that you have and clarity that you need, we'll also get him to answer some of those questions. 0614 104 107.
The only talk radio afternoon drive show that makes sense. Beyond the Headline with Aldrin Sampear, right here on SAFM.
Hi, good afternoon, Aldrin. It's Johnson in Mbombela. Look, the Vodacom Makate case is a very good example. It is teaching us, as blacks in particular, that for a very long time we have not taken the legal route to fight against injustices in many fronts. So let us wake up and learn from this Makate example. I sum up the gentleman. As for the CEO of Vodacom, once this matter has been settled, he must simply resign. He has failed to deliver.
Good afternoon, Adren. It's Brian Mabai from Protea Glen. There's nothing that we can do when it comes to our children in school. It's either they're in crime, it's either they are so violent to each other. It's only up to us to discipline ourselves, how we relate to each other in the communities, how we interact. If we are so violent, so what our children do in school is copying what actually is happening in society. So we need to change and shape the society dynamics itself, because we've been rude to each other. Then we expect that the teachers will discipline our own children who we fail to discipline. Prima by Protect Land. Thank you.
Aldrin and listeners,
This thing of rights, that's a problem. How can kids have rights? I'm not talking about the teachers who abuse
How
kids.
can kids not have rights?
Teachers are the ones who are supposed to show the kids the way. So there must be no right at school.
No.
Teachers must take care of pupils at school. That's all. Put the rights there by the kids. So what about your own?
Yeah, maybe I don't think that the way to go about it is saying that kids shouldn't have rights. They are human beings, and of course, like any other human being, they have rights. It's enshrined in the constitution of the country. But the conversation that needs to be had is also around what type of parenting styles would lead to the type of violence that we currently see playing out in schools. And by the way, it's not the first time that we're seeing violence playing out in schools. It's not the first time. If you remember back to the days of Yizo, when was it? In the 1990s, 1999, early 2000s. Yeah, the early 2000s. Yizo spoke to violence that play out in schools. That was back then already. And it was a thing back then already, which means that the adults that came out of those schools are the same adults that later on became parents, the ones who have given birth to the children that we have today and the people that we refer to as children in schools. What is it that those parents have learned in schools that also has an influence in their parenting styles, but also the ability to speak to the children about violence and how to deal with violence and stem out violence? So maybe we should need to take a few steps back and say, what conversations are we having with the parent?
Some say, Ematot Aipeli. Others are saying, who X Ongasoveli? Black and white, tackles, gold and black in the DSTV Premiership. This is the Soweto Derby, Mzansi's biggest football jamboree. Sazo Shuba, Amapaganea versus Amakosi on Saturday, 9 March at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
MasterChef, the biggest, most loved culinary TV show on the planet, is coming to S3. This fresh local version of MasterChef South Africa will cook up a storm on S3 for the first time in 2024. Enter on www.masterchefsa.tv and start prepping for the opportunity to win R1 million and the prestigious title of Mzansi's new MasterChef. Entries close on the 15th of March. Channel A Better You only on S3. Open up.
You are listening to Aldrin Sampear on SAFM.
Do you have what it takes to become a football commentator? Have you ever dreamed of becoming a football commentator? If you think that you have the commentary skills, then guess what? The legendary football commentator and well-known voice of South African football commentary, Baba Mthethwa, is looking for you. Mthethwa recently launched a competition called Naile Voice, which is aimed at finding South Africa's next sports caster, and he's joining us now. But first of all, before we speak to him, do you recognize any of the voices here?
It's a shoot!
Wanataka Chiefs 3 against 2. Happy, knowledge Musona. Abianale. Motileja Kashosli Bisi. Ayakade Leleko. Yadila Pulukwade. Kwasi for life.
2 minutes left on the clock. Here they come at pace. Drew Mitchell looks to cut back inside, takes his eye off the ball and knocks it forward, and now there's a chance for the All Blacks to break with Ben Smith. He kicks the ball upfield, nobody home. Chase is on. This could be the third try. Smith is there. It's controlled by the feeds. It's Bernard Barrett who's through to score to the uprights. Game, set, match. Call it what you like in any sport. The All Blacks have retained that trophy. Sustained Wallaby pressure through the phases, and eventually Ben Smith robbed Mitchell of the ball as he knocked it forward. A little kick ahead. He chased after it. Bowden Barrett.
So, do you recognize any of those voices? Baba Mthethwa, you're not allowed to guess who those people are. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, boy.
How are you doing? By the way, we're both from the Free State. Welcome, to be specific, Baba Mthethwa.
Yes.
With the masses.
It's very good to share with the masses so that they know that Velcom has talent. Yes.
Indeed. Tell me, so I'm listening to this montage that we just put together now, and I'm asking myself, so how does a commentator get ready for the match? Because there's a lot of energy that is involved as well. And I've realized as well that the vocabulary is important. Outside of the knowledge of the sport, outside of the knowledge of who the players are, the athletes are, you must have a vocab to carry on commentating. Hi, Baba Mthethwa? Oh, have we lost him? Baba Mthethwa, are you there? Hello. Okay, we seem to have lost him. We're going to try and see if we can dial him back. So if you are interested, one day want to become a commentator, maybe this could be your chance to really crack it and become a commentator. I wonder which sporting coach you'll be looking into to say that this is the type of sporting coach that I want to be commentating for. And also, is there a difference between commentating for television and commentating for radio? Remember that with the TV, of course, you have the visuals and you're looking at the visuals, whereas with radio, the commentators would be looking at the visuals, of course, but you as the person who's listening, you are just listening to the voice and how the person describes what is currently happening. And sometimes you find people jumping up at their radios as well because of what is playing out. Okay, we're going to try and see if we can re-establish that line with him. We seem to have a problem. Okay, in the meantime, let's take some of your voice notes on 0614-104-107.
Hi, I'm Aldrin from the tracker. Can you just allow SAFM listeners, those with talent of commentary, maybe Baba Mthethwa will just consider them in the auditions? Can they just send a voice note, maybe at 3 seconds, 5 seconds?
Okay.
Please, Abu Aldrin, can you just allow them to just send in their little auditions, a few seconds?
Yeah, okay. A few seconds of commentating. Unfortunately, we didn't agree to this with Baba Mthethwa, so it's just you trying your luck. And let's see what's going to happen. Do you think that you have what it takes? But maybe you can just play around with it as well. Send us through your voice notes on your commentating skills or commentary skills. 0614-104-107.
Hi, Aldrin. The last gentleman is the memory mentalist, one of my favorite radio broadcasters and sports broadcasters. Michael Abramson. Thanks.
Yes, Aldrin, that voice. I so miss that voice when Chiefs were still taking the trophies. But since then, I don't know this voice. I don't
over 9 years ago.
Chiefs is making that was Baba Mthethwa where he would say, FNB Stadium. Crocodile. It's Croc. Thanks, Aldrin. I don't know the second voice, but I usually hear the guys speaking to the guys here at SAFM. Thanks.
Yeah, no, and I'm not going to reveal that as yet, so please do send through those voice notes, and let's see whether you're able to guess who the people are who are commentating. How about Hutadana? How about that? And actually, the Naile voice has the Huta legacy.
Hi, good day, Aldrin.
It's Scully. The first one is Mtetwa, the very own Mtetwa.
Yeah.
The second one will be our Michael Abramson. Thank you.
There's another voice that you missed. I don't know. I cannot confirm nor deny that those are the people, but there are 3 people in that clip, in that montage that we played earlier on. 3 people in that montage. Can you identify who those people are?
Hi, Aldrin. I'd like to test my commentating skills, but I'm going to commentate a Premier League match for my favorite team, Man United. Here goes. Bruno Fernandes with the ball. A nice inside foot straight through to Rashford. Rashford onside all the way through. Marcus Rashford puts it through. It's 1-0 to Manchester United versus Liverpool, and Old Trafford erupts.
Okay, that could work. That could work, but I think it needs a little bit more energy. There's a lot of energy that comes with that commentating. When you score a goal, you can't say, "Well, the goal has been scored." You need to make sure that there's energy. Okay, let's listen to more.
Welcome back to the second half. Scintillating game between these 2 giants of South African football. Kaizer Chiefs up against the mighty Buccaneers. Chiefs was leading 2-1 in this piece. Yes, Alvin, this was Flourish from the Western Cape. Have a good survive. Welcome back to the second half. Scintillating game between these 2 giants of South African football. Kaizer Chiefs up against the mighty Buccaneers. Chiefs was leading 2-1 in this piece. Yes, Alvin, this was Flourish from the Western Cape. Have a good survive. Welcome back.
Hi, Aldrin. We have Babam Tetwa, Kobo Manyapelo, and Michael Abramson. Thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, we're now struggling to get a hold of Babam Tetwa. I don't know, maybe a bit later on. Hopefully, we do get a hold of him before we end the show. And he can tell us about the competition that he's running. I think it's a very important one. We need to pull up other people with us as we go up. Again, do you recognize these voices?
It's a super papa. Super papa. Super papa. Wanataka Chiefs 3 against 2. Happy, knowledge Musona. Abianale. Motileja Kashosli Bisi. Ayakada Leleto. Yadila Pulukwade. Quasi for life.
2 minutes left on the clock. Here they come at pace. Drew Mitchell looks to cut back inside, takes his eye off the ball and knocks it forward, and now there's a chance for the All Blacks to break with Ben Smith. He kicks the ball upfield, nobody home. Chase is on. This could be the 3rd try. Smith is there. It's controlled by the feet. It's Bowden Barrett who's through to score to the uprights. Game, set, match. Call it what you like in any sport. The All Blacks have retained their trophy. Sustained Wallaby pressure through the phases, and eventually Ben Smith...
Call it what you want, Doomy. Okay, so Dumi's here to come and help you out. There are 3 voices.
There's 3 voices.
And Dumi's about to give you a clue.
So the clue is that this person like to say, therefore, now.
Is that
That's it.
The second voice? Let's repeat that.
Therefore, now.
Do you know who that person is? Let's listen to one last audition tape.
lisuke esandleni sokudla lapho ligijima khona nebafana bemakhosi lapho lishova khona ngemalta hamba lisa khona kuCastillo Destiretto lapha futhi lishona khona kumfana Breeze la yakhona lena iDerby yaseSoweto la kuhlangana khona imbofane kanye neMaltese Robbers botsotsi basemkhumbini Orlando Pirates umagebhulo omnyama lona lithatha khona libhola lisuka ngakusenta sekele iphinze liconsa khona futhi ngaka right esandleni sokudla lapho ligijima khona lelikhosi.
Do me, please help me out. How do I pronounce it? Hakuna therefore mo khuili ya dinao. Hakuna therefore mo khuili ya dinao. It's 5 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Huguenot Tunnel closed in the Western Cape, and MPC wants the electricity minister out. Good day to you. The Huguenot Tunnel on the N1 outside Paarl in the Western Cape has been closed after a fire ignited near the De Toerskloof Pass. 3 helicopters are being used to fight the fire. Cape Wineland spokesperson Joanne Otto.
At this stage, there are 3 Cape Winelands District Municipalities fire vehicles and crew, 2 contracted ground teams from NCC and 3 choppers, 2 from our contracted aerial resources, Leading Edge, and 1 from the Provincial Disaster Management Centre. A further 2 vehicles are en route. The fire services have requested that motorists do not stop to take photos. Not only is this a hazard to fire vehicles, but it also hampers traffic flow.
The multi-party charter, or MPC, says getting rid of the electricity ministry headed by Kgotsenso Ramokgopa will be one of its key priorities should it be elected into government after this year's elections. The MPC's held a press briefing outside the Kelvin Power Station in Kempton Park, east of Johannesburg, where it shared its plans to end load shedding. The DA leader, John Steenhuisen.
This ministry has produced little tangible results towards resolving the electricity crisis. The minister, or project manager as the ANC call him, had a lot to say about the increase in supply. What he did not tell you is that the bulk of that new energy coming into the sector is by independent power producers and people going off-grid themselves. This ministry has not added value to date, and it is simply lowering yet another strata of salaries, bureaucracy.
The Defence Force says it's discovered that at least 22 people who are not on its books were called up by the Zimvumbu Regiment to quell unrest in KwaZulu-Natal in 2021. Billions of rands in damage and losses were caused during the looting and violence of July that year. The department says investigations carried out by the Human Resources Division has found a number of other irregularities with how the call-up was conducted. There was an outcry at the time following reports that the called-up members were placed in a camp lacking decent ablution facilities, proper rations, as well as sleeping arrangements. Brigadier General Joseph Manyat.
There are personnel who reported alleging that they were also soldiers. And upon the audit, we realized that approximately 22 of them were never in the Department of Defense before, or have never integrated. So it means these members will have to be enlisted as an auxiliary service, which is the same system which was used during the COVID-19. And in order to create their force numbers for payments, they will require their ID numbers, also the tax numbers.
The late reporting of crimes by alleged rape victims in Bishop Stephen Bafana Zondo's rape case remains under the spotlight at the High Court in Pretoria. Zondo, who's the leader of the Rivers of Living Waters Church, faces multiple rape charges relating to the alleged rape of female congregants in his church. Defence advocate Pete Pistorius has put it to clinical psychologist Gerard Labuskakni that the late reporting of the alleged rapes is questionable.
If the accused case was before the court and you've been privy to his evidence, you would have been in a much better position to express an opinion regarding all the facts, also pertaining to the falseness or the truthfulness of, for instance, late reporting. That's all.
Well, I think then I'm really starting to do exactly what it was said I'm not supposed to do, which is to evaluate all the facts. And I'm only referring to the aspect of the late reporting.
The government in Chad says several people have been killed following an attack by members of an opposition party on the country's national security agency. The BBC's Paul Ingier reports.
Chad's communication minister did not provide any details of the attack on the National Security Agency, but he said the head of the opposition Socialist Party Without Borders, Yaya Dillo, was behind it. He is an outspoken critic of the country's interim president, General Mahamat Deby, who is his cousin. Mr. Deby seized power when his father, who'd been the country's leader for 30 years, was killed in 2021. On Tuesday, it was announced that a presidential election is to be held in May. A recent controversial referendum led to a change in Chad's constitution, allowing Mahamat Deby to stand as a presidential candidate.
Top story, the Huguenot Tunnel on the N1 outside Paarl in the Western Cape is being closed after a fire ignited near the De Tours Kloof Pass. That's SAFM News. I'm Greg Hoos.
Coming up in your sports, Netball South Africa announced Jenny van Dijk as new SPAR Proteus, and Kompela pleads with SAFCA to not only focus on politics. More details at 5:30.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation.
Good day. I'm Madidaba Wasichaba, and these are your top stories. Reports state that SAMA award-winning, platinum-selling artist Vusi Nova is planning to get his leg back and tell his side of the story. After years of getting vilified by the media and becoming a victim of cancel culture, the star is ready to show the world who he is beyond the name and the fame, proving why Angeke Baskone as Mzansi gets to see him unapologetic, uncut and unprovoked. For more on this, catch Vusi Nova Unprovoked starting on the 2nd of March on SABC1. I'm Madidaba Wasichaba.
The Market Update, Monday to Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m.
Want to stay ahead of the financial game? Join us tonight from 6 to 7 p.m. for an insightful journey through the day's market developments, financial updates, and investment news. Tune in for your daily dose of financial intelligence as we navigate the twists and turns of the financial landscape with expert insights. Only on the SAFM Market Update.
SAFM Market Update with Jimmy Muyaha. SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very good afternoon. A little bit of sticky traffic down through the Crown and Mayfair areas today. Some load shedding there until 6 p.m. So Main Reef Road heading out from Crown towards Amalgam is under pressure. Also some annoying delays around the Rosebank, Dunkeld, West Hyde Park areas. Also Parktown North and Parkwood load shedding in those areas until 6 p.m. as well today. The old Joburg Road around the Samrand Bridge, that's heavy between sort of Olifantsfontein and Brakfontein Road. That section of old Joburg Road really slowed both ways. A lot of pressure around the Prospect and Isipingo side of Durban today. The N2 was closed earlier with some strike action, seeing a load of rubble being dropped across the N2 north of Prospect, and it's left slow traffic on the N2, but really heavy around the Prospect and Isipingo local routes. M7 into Bel Air and Wakesley both ways this afternoon heavy. The N3 queuing out towards Paradise Valley. That's a big backlog from Spaghetti Junction on your way to Pinetown. As you heard in the news, the Huguenot Tunnel is closed due to a fire, so there's some queuing pressure, certainly on the Paarl side as you head out into that closure point. And there's another fire burning just beside the N2 between Rappenberg and Jan Smuts Drive. So the N2 going out of Cape Town stays pretty heavily backed up from the CBD through Hospital Bend all the way out towards Pineland. Anything that feeds into that N2 is quite heavily backed up, including the M3, which is queuing all the way in from Newlands today up to Hospital Bend. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Let's run through the numbers.
A negative number.
The lowest number ever.
It's a big number.
The number is through the roof.
As a sector, we've produced more than 1,763,000,000.
Listen properly. 700. Listen properly. 769,820.
Honorable member. Honorable member, what are you talking about? What are you raising up?
Why do people say phone numbers first? Why? Like, did you hear Aldrin Sampear? He was like, 072485393. That is your phone number. So, yeah. But then, how are they supposed to write it down?
This is Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
It is 9 minutes after 5 o'clock. Coming up on the show in this hour, we're in conversation with Omar Shakir, who is the Israel-Palestine director at Human Rights Watch, as we look at what's the current situation in Gaza. And also remember that there was the report that Israel was supposed to submit to the ICJ following the judgment that was handed down, or the orders that were handed down from that application that was brought by South Africa at the International Court of Justice. We understand that the report has been submitted to the ICJ. Also been told that the report has has been given to the South African government. Yesterday, we tried to get confirmation from the Department of Justice's spokesperson, but he said that he couldn't confirm that indeed the document has been delivered. However, we understand that the document has been delivered to the South African government as well as the ICJ. So we'll be speaking to Omar Shakir, who will be joining us in the next short while. And then last week, remember the judgment that was handed down in the Enyobeni Tavern case? And the questions that were raised around, was the judgment fair? Is the judgment, the sentence that has been handed down, does it actually deter people from selling alcohol to minors? Because that is the conviction of the co-owners of Enyobeni, that they were convicted for selling alcohol to a minor, and then they were slapped with a 5,000 rand fine or 100 days imprisonment. So we're going to try and make sense of the judgment. Unfortunately, once again, we've been trying to get a hold of the judgment, and we're told that the magistrate's not ready with the judgment, and then also this is now with the soft copy of the judgment. And but we will be speaking to a legal consultant and director of Consult KM, Koketo Malope, and then we're also speaking to the spokesperson for the Eastern Cape Liquor Board. They'll be joining us just after our conversation with Omar. 0614-104107, and can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear.
Every person, no matter who you are, what music you're inclined to listen to, and what you do with your weekends, you need a weekend playlist. It's that musical mix of music that accompanies the lazy weekends, whether catching up with friends and family or just taking some time to reflect. Tune in to The Soundtrack of Your Life with me, Ernest Pillay, Saturdays and Sundays, 1 to 4 on SAFM.
#SAFMBTH.
12 minutes after 5 o'clock, in conversation next with Omar Shakir, who is the Israeli-Palestine director at Human Rights Watch. As the war continues in Gaza, Human Rights Watch is accusing Israel of non-compliance with the ICJ ruling and says the country continues to block aid to millions of Palestinians. The organization is also in support of the United Nations report that suggests that the amount of aid reaching the Palestinian territory dropped by 50% in February compared to the previous month. However, Israel has strongly rejected these accusations. So what should happen next, and what does Israel need to do to comply with the International Court of Justice ruling? Omar Shakir now joining us on the line. Omar, good afternoon. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
What's your observation around what has happened with the instructions that have come from the Israeli government, and also as far as it goes to the action that has been taken in Rafah?
The International Court of Justice on January 26 issued a binding order. They called for the Israeli government to prevent genocide and further mass atrocities against Palestinians. And in specific, they called for ensuring that basic services and aid enters Gaza and reaches the people of Gaza. 1 month later, electricity remains off. Only one of 3 pipelines of water remains on and at reduced capacity. And the number of trucks entering Gaza has gone down. It's gone down by, as noted, 50% in February. Actually, in the latter half of February, it's gone down by even more, about 1/3 of the trucks as compared to the several weeks before the ICJ ruled. Let's remember that 500 trucks were entering Gaza before October 7th, 147 in the few weeks before per day, and now we're talking about a trickle, 40, 50 trucks a day entering Gaza. In addition, the trucks are not reaching northern Gaza, where the population that remains there is facing catastrophic starvation. You have reports from Save the Children warning that people are left to forage of scraps that were eaten by rats and leaves to survive. And aid convoys have been hit. Israel has a duty as the occupying power to ensure the welfare of the occupied population. They're not complying with this order. States should use all forms of leverage, including embargoes and sanctions, to press Israel to comply with this ruling.
And there's this report from the Associated Press that says that Oxfam is also saying that children in the north in recent weeks have died of starvation.
Yes, I mean, there are harrowing reports about people that are already dying because of starvation. Let's remember that in most famines around the world, people don't necessarily die directly from starvation. They die because of diseases that are associated with the deteriorating humanitarian situation. We already hear reports of hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza facing diseases as a result of overcrowding, as a result of lack of clean water. Let's remember that virtually no one in Gaza has clean water. And that means when you go for the hospital, and again, there are tens of thousands killed, there are even more injured. Without clean water, it's hard to get good health care. It's hard to provide for sanitation, for everyday consumption. And so beyond the reports of people dying directly of starvation, there have been really harrowing studies done about the number of people who will die because of the lack of water, the lack of food, and it could, even exceed what we've seen killed, and we've seen scores killed every day by airstrikes. This is a humanitarian catastrophe. It is a man-made problem. Israel could flick the switch, could turn on the water, it could allow the amount of trucks to enter, it could allow for the rebuilding of the destroyed infrastructure, for people to return to their home, but they're not doing so. And they've said for months that they're depriving people of food, of water, of basic necessities as a political tool. They're using starvation as a tool of war. That's a war crime. It must end.
What about the truce talks that are currently underway in Paris? Do you think that there is something that could come out of that is tangible, also considering that you have President Biden, who has said that he's hopeful that a deal will be reached?
Look, there are different reports about a deal, the reason why many have called for a ceasefire is this urgency, right? Hundreds of thousands facing a looming famine, facing catastrophic starvation, the scores of bodies piling up per day. But let's remember, as a matter of international humanitarian law, ceasefire or not, aid must be allowed to reach all people. Hostages should be released. Unlawful attacks should cease. So this idea that basic compliance with international humanitarian law should be subject to whether or not there is a political deal or a ceasefire negotiation perverts the law. The law is binding. It's not a deal between fighters. It is a deal with humanity. It's being flagrantly violated by the Israeli government, but also by Palestinian armed groups, and that must end.
Biden once again saying that Israel has committed that there will be no military activities during Ramadan in the Gaza Strip. But there have been previous promises that have been made as well that haven't been adhered to or held up to as well. But what sort of action should be coming then from the United Nations Security Council, if anything at all, to ensure that Israel does actually follow through on the order that has been handed down by ICJ?
Look, I mean, it's a binding order. It doesn't need any action from the Security Council, in order for it to be acted upon. So we've called for states to use their leverage. And what must happen right away is an arms embargo on the Israeli government. Countries that are providing weapons risk complicity in the grave abuses that are taking place. Human Rights Watch has been saying this for months. The UN Special Procedures issued a statement around this last week. So there must be an arms embargo. There must be a call to respect the ICJ ruling, also for support for the International Criminal Court proceedings. And frankly, states must evaluate all forms of engagement with the Israeli government to ensure non-complicity in these serious crimes. South Africa, I think, has really taken a step to push all states to ensure compliance, to uphold the rules-based international order. And it's time for action.
Yep.
Words have failed. Humanity has failed. We need action to prevent further atrocities.
What about Hamas?
Hamas, absolutely. I mean, let's be clear. What happened on October 7th involved the commission of very grave crimes, deliberate killings of civilians, taking of civilians as hostages. The hostages must be immediately and unconditionally released. They cannot be used as bargaining chips, just as aid cannot be used as bargaining chips. There should be accountability for the serious crimes perpetrated. This is a call on all states to hold all actors to the same standard. War crimes should be called out. Perpetrators should be held to account. Weapons should not be provided when there's a risk they'll be used unlawfully. All those calls are consistent, and they should be consistently made, whether it's by the Israeli government or Hamas. That doesn't mean this is a fight between equals. We're talking about a very powerful occupying government versus others, but abuses have been committed by all parties, and we need to be clear on that and consistent in what we call for.
Thank you so much for your time. Omar Shakir is the Israel-Palestine Director for Human Rights Watch. 0614-104-107.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
21 minutes after 5 o'clock, we're in conversation next with Koketso Mulope, who is a legal consultant and director of Consult KM. Last week, a couple who own Enyobeni Tavern were convicted of selling alcohol to minors on the night of a pens down party in June 2022. The couple was slapped with a 5,000 rand fine each, or 100 days imprisonment. One of the questions raised during the discussion was why the judge or the magistrate may have not followed the national guidelines of appropriate fines under the circumstances. Does the provisional guidelines take precedence? To help us understand this further, we speak to Koketso, and then after that, we'll speak to the Eastern Cape Liquor Board. Koketso, good evening. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
What's your reading into how the magistrate dealt with this matter, and also you have national legislation with regards to what should happen when alcohol is sold to a minor and the conviction that is attached to it, or the sentence, not more than R1 million fine and not more than 5 years imprisonment?
Look, I think, in my view, I think the magistrate imposed an appropriate sanction. And the reason is quite simple. It's this. So under the Liquor Act applies to all manufacturing and distribution of liquor products on a national level. But insofar as the micro-manufacturing and retailing is concerned, that continues to be regulated at a provincial level, and in this particular case, the Eastern Cape Liquor Act, which is what was actually applicable at this time. And insofar as those sanctions under that particular act, a maximum sentence of 5 years imprisonment is prescribed, and then obviously with a fine of no less than 600,000 rand. So I also want to, I think for the benefit of those who perhaps don't understand or need more insight on the hierarchy of our courts, it is important to also remember that insofar as the magistrates court is concerned, it is a lower court as opposed to our high court, our superior court of appeal, and our constitutional court. And so lower courts are considered to be creatures of statute. And what do I mean by creatures of statute? A creature of statute is a decision-making functionary that is created by law. So in this particular case, the Magistrates Act, right? And so this particular Magistrates Act gives the magistrate court its powers and duties which emanate from this particular provision, such as the one in the Liquor Act. And so similarly, it is limited by this particular enabling legislation, which is the Eastern Cape Liquor Act. So one cannot, or the court, in my view, cannot entertain matters which go beyond that particular statute that created it.
So does this mean that the highest fine for such a conviction or under such a conviction is 5,000 rand? This is now under the Eastern Cape Liquor Act.
The highest fine, no. The highest fine is not 5,000 rand. So, for example, if a fine is not particularly prescribed in a very specific legislation like the Liquor Act, then we go back to what the Magistrates Court Act allows a regional magistrate court to impose as a maximum, which is 600,000 rand. But you must remember as well that when the judgment was being laid down or explained to everybody, the magistrate was quite clear that for sanctions or crimes of this particular nature, right? In particular, the Eastern Cape, the East London District, a fine of 2,000 rand is typically imposed by the chief magistrate. He's empowered to administer that kind of fine. So, of course, the magistrate is entitled to deviate from that particular norm, but that kind of deviation should not be too drastic if you can't also give, I suppose, compelling reasons why it should be. And so, in this particular instance, a fine is appropriate. And you must also remember that a very interesting point was made by the court. And it's that the state actually offered the accused the option of an admission of guilt fine. And therefore, an inference can be drawn that the state has no issue with the imposition of a fine in the circumstances.
Yeah. And with that said also, because we also understand the judgments that are handed down as well as the sentence that are handed down is that they also serve as a form of trying to deter people who would also want to commit or could also commit such a crime. And I'm not too sure whether 5,000 Rand fine would actually deter somebody who is in business. But there's another point to this conversation as well, because here we're speaking about a tavern that is in a township. A tavern, of course, I don't think that they make about $1 million Rand a month or something like that. But what sort of amount would then come across as this is a deterrent outside of dealing with the aggravating circumstances surrounding this particular case?
Thanks. I think that's a very good question because it really goes down to the principles of sentencing. And I think some of us have a particular misunderstanding or an unrealistic expectation on sentencing. While sentencing can form part of a deterrent, it is not the only factor that is considered. The main factors that are considered in order to impose an appropriate sentence, right, you need to balance the legitimate interests of all people that are affected in that particular matter, right? And in this particular circumstance, the magistrate took into consideration the personal circumstances of the accused, which is crucial in every criminal matter, and then 2, the crime that was committed, and 3, the interests of the community affected by that crime. Of course, we can accept that, largely the crime committed and the interests of the community affected by the crime hinge on each other. And then insofar as the personal circumstances of the accused are concerned, look, we didn't really get much or many submissions, at least in my view, about the personal circumstances of the accused, save us to say that, they were first-time offenders, they had no previous convictions, they're a married couple with 4 children who are, I believe, were minors, as I understand it. And, one of the accused also has health issues. So we have to look at that particular component and balance it with the crime that is committed. And in this particular instance, it is also important to remember that the crime that the magistrate court is required to adjudicate over is the charges under the Liquor Act, because that is how the charge sheet is canvassed, right? There are only 2 offences that we had to deal with here, which is the offence of selling or providing alcohol to minors, right? And then alternatively, conniving with employees or their agents to do the same thing, right? It is not to say that the murder, or I don't even want to say murder, I would say the deaths rather, that's the correct way to say it. The deaths of those minors is not going to be considered at another stage. That is another component which I believe the Director of Public Prosecutions will be opening a formal inquest on so that we can ascertain whether any criminal liability should attach to anybody for what's happened. But in this particular instance, Aldrin, it is the crime or the offences under the Liquor Act that must be considered by the court, and the court does not have the inherent jurisdiction to entertain anything outside of those charges.
Thank you so much for that explanation. Koketso Mulope is a legal consultant and director of Consult KM. Listening into the conversation is Mgwebi Msia, who's the spokesperson for the Eastern Cape Liquor Board. Another question that was raised was the role that liquor boards play in developing guidelines for licensed liquor traders and whether this case has raised questions surrounding social responsibility of the institution to inspect traders. Mgwebi is now joining us on the line. Mgwebi, good evening. Thank you so much for making time for us. So first of all, the Liquor Board's reaction to the judgment and the sentence.
Thank you for having us on your show, Adrian, and good evening to your listeners. We are not happy. We are not happy with the sentence. We were excited when we got the judgment that they were found guilty. However, when the sentence was handed down, we really were disappointed. We would have, hoped for something harsher than what was actually handed out by the magistrate.
What do you then make of the explanation that Koketso just gave now around what the factors are that the magistrate was considering?
I think I'm happy with the explanation that she has actually given, because that is what we are looking for, just to explain to the listeners and everyone else, the merits of this case. Because there has been a confusion, of this case with the death of the miners. So I've always wanted to distinguish between the two, that the case, our case, has nothing to do with the deaths of the miners, in that liquor outlet, but more to do with the contravention of our act. So we have always wanted to clarify that. I think she has done that perfectly well, just to clarify to the listeners that yes, there is a difference between the two. Ours was only about selling to the miners. The death of the miners, that case is still coming. It's starting tomorrow.
Yeah. So from your end as the liquor board, you're not satisfied with the sentence that was handed down. Is that the end of the matter for you?
Yes, Aldrin, we are not satisfied. However, what we want to underline perhaps is that we understand that, the sentence still falls within the provisions of our Act. So although we're not happy, but it still falls within the provisions of our Act.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. Mkwebe Msia is the spokesperson for the Eastern Cape Liquor Board. It's a minute after 5:30, time for the news headlines.
In the headlines, the High Court in Pretoria has dismissed an application by a medical doctor who attempted to stop the SIU from probing 20 million rand in circumcision funding from the National Lotteries Commission. The Huguenot Tunnel on the N1 outside Paarl in the Western Cape has been closed due to a fire, and the DRC president has accepted a proposal to meet with his Rwandan counterpart. There's a full update at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
There's a crash in Joburg. It's on the Mike 1 North near 11th Avenue. If you're leaving Central Joburg, there's a queue to work through there. Prospect and starting to ease up after some dramas earlier today. The N2 North coming off 20 Hill is moving better. And Cape Town, if you're leaving the city centre, heading out through the central area, it is gridlocked on top of gridlocking today. All the highway routes are busy. Routes through Salt River, Observatory, Mowbray are all jammed up as well. Just to give you an idea how heavy it is, even the M3 inbound queues from Paradise Road at Newlands. That's how bad it is just getting into that congested N2 outbound through Hospital Bend. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Khapele.
In your sports this hour, newly appointed Netball Proteas coach Jenny Van Dijk says that she's eagerly anticipating the opportunity to work alongside former Proteas captain Zanele Mdodana. Now Mdodana comes in as her assistant coach, and their first assignment is to assemble a group of 30 players and finalize the team that they'll be working with moving forward.
South Africa is what I really work and they want to do what's best for the country, and I do trust the process. So at the end of the day, I'm just stoked that it's Zanele. I think, she's got so much fire and passion, and you can just hear in the way she do things, and you could hear in the interview that she gave as well. To her, it's important that we get a good position. She used to be a Protea captain. She's played a lot. She brings in that expertise, and she's somebody that really wants to push performance, and that's the type of people we need to surround ourselves with. If we want to dream big, we need to surround ourselves with the right people, and I do believe that is really one of the best assistant coaches I could have asked for.
In football, former Kaizer Chiefs coach Machine Etegral reckons that the lack of high-level planning in Kaizer Chiefs' technical leadership is one of the biggest contributors to the current state of sad affairs. Chiefs are now well on their way to finishing their 9th consecutive season without silverware, something they last tasted during Stuart Baxter's first tenure that ended in the 2014-2015 season. Etegral says that it all points to the lack of technical vision by Amakosi.
The biggest problem is that the greatest enemy for yourself is always the illusion of knowledge. So if you think you know it, that's the illusion, that's an enemy for you. So in the end, we don't know. Today's football is changing every day, and we, as I said myself, when I went with the Turkish national team, it was for me also to adjust to the situation. That is what is happening. So I think you can see by Sundowns, they're running away in South African football and internationally as well. Behind the scenes, for me, very, very influential people. Also, like I cannot pass to mention Burke. Mr. Burke, he's one of the top sides in international football. And so behind the scenes, he's already looking. Sportive directors are not the ones who are grinding results. Grinding results are the technical part. But sportive directors and influential people behind the scenes are grinding the results for the next 10 years. So you need to have, I don't think so it's been done by Kaiser Jr. or behind the scenes with people who are in the business, but you need to have really expertise who can handle and grind the results for the next 10 years. And that's what's not happening with Chiefs.
Still staying with football, former Morocco Swallows head coach Steve Kompela is pleading with the South African Football Coaches Association to play a more prominent role in football coaching matters in the country and not only focus on politics. Looking back at the recent situation at his former club, Kompela says that it was not only players who were affected by the off-field administrative issues, but coaches too. In rugby, the Sharks have signed Jordan Hendrickse, who makes the move from the Lions in Johannesburg. Hendrickse will join at the beginning of the 2024-25 season, and it's a homecoming of sorts for Hendrickse, who went to school at Durban's Glenwood High with his brother Jaden, who has been at the Sharks since 2020 and is now a World Cup winner with the Springboks. Sharks are currently rock bottom of the United Rugby Championship table and are next in action when they take on the Lions at Ellis Park on Saturday. Ending things off with cricket, pace bowler Mohammad Shami is out of this year's Indian Premier League after having surgery on his Achilles tendon. Shami, who plays for Gujarat Titans, posted photographs on social media of himself in hospital after the operation yesterday. He said that recovery will take some time, meaning that he will miss the glitzy T20 League that begins next month. On that note, it is a wrap from my side. For SAFM Sport, I'm Dumin Kapel. Mudimugyo.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
And it's time for a MoneyWeb market update with Jimmy Moyaha. Jimmy, good evening. Welcome to the show. Looking at Harmony Gold's stellar results.
Good evening, Aldrin. Good evening to me, and good evening to the listeners. Yes, Harmony Gold reported their first half of the year's results, and revenues were up north of 8 billion rand. So we're going to dig into that with the company's financial director and just get a sense of how they've been performing. They paid out a record dividend of R1.47 a share for this interim period for the 6 months. This time last year, they paid 0 interim dividend, so it is quite a significant increase in the interim dividend paid there. We're also going to be taking a look at cash build results. They didn't fare as well as Harmony. In fact, their first half of the year's performance wasn't the best there. They had almost 130 million rand impairment to deal with and a couple of other things that affected them there. So they're under a bit of pressure there. We're going to speak to their CEO as well, get a sense of what's happening there. And then we've got an interesting conversation with Alan Gray around investing in the best education for your children and for the future. And we know some parents like planning ahead, and even before you have your kids enrolled for school, you've started a college fund and those sorts of things. So we're going to dig into that with Alan Gray and see how it is they prepare their clients, or how it is they can prepare investors for that. And then we've got an interesting conversation for our executive lounge today. I'm speaking to the managing director at Heineken Beverages. We haven't had a chance to speak to them at all since Heineken bought out the Distel Group as well as Namibian Breweries, and I know that I think a week and a half or 2 weeks ago Heineken then impaired that business and wrote it down by some 10 billion rand. So we're going to dig into that. We're going to dig into some of the other things that Geordie gets up to as the managing director of this region, and we're going to hopefully get a sense of what he enjoys doing in his downtime. But before that, the markets have had a fairly quiet day, depending on which part of the market you've been looking at. There have been other areas of the market that have had a very robust day, and to that point, Henko Krier has been keeping an eye on those markets, and he joins me now to give us a sense of how the markets have been performing. Good afternoon, Henko. Thanks as always for keeping an eye on the markets. Some markets not moving, equity markets showing signs of red, but it doesn't matter because once again, Bitcoin's top of the list.
Yes, Jimmy. Hello to you and to Aldrin, and good evening to all the listeners. And I must say, world market seems to be angry today. Like all around the world, red in the face. US markets now trading 0.5% weaker, and European stocks also 0.5% down. And then the JSE finished 1.3% lower at 72,205 points. The industrial index 1.4% weaker. The financial index lost 1%, and the resources index finished 2.2% weaker. Some of the companies that contributed to those sub-indices were Anglo and Naspers. They each lost 3%.
Oh, we just lost Enku there. Sorry about that. Let me give you the update while we see if we can get him back on the line. As he mentioned, some of the counters didn't have such a good day there. The likes of Naspers losing 3%. I see Sasfins also having a fairly bearish day, likely off the back of those news that SARS is still pursuing that 4.7 billion rand tax claim. Cashbuild not having a good day either, off the back of those results that we're going to be digging into a little later. They're down about 8% on the day's trade. If we look at some of the guys that had a fairly decent day, Afrimat was up about 5%. Home Choice up about 4% there. WBHO, another construction company there, like Cashbuild, but more on the industrial construction side, was up about 4.4%. RCL Foods, they were up about 6% on today's trade. So very interesting moves on that side. Some stocks really doing well in light of this. Let me give you the summary of those markets. Rand, not such a good day. Weakening against all of the majors. Weakening against the euro, the pound, as well as the dollar. And sitting at about 19 Rand 22 against the dollar. We're going to dig into that and see what that all means when we have our show. The Brent crude price is up at about $84 a barrel. That doesn't bode well for the petrol price in South Africa in the coming weeks. Hopefully we don't get too many increases, and hopefully this price doesn't stay elevated for much longer. But yeah, on that Bitcoin price, as I mentioned, Bitcoin having a rocker of a day, up at nearly $62,000 a Bitcoin, which is almost, stand corrected, it's just under 1.2 million. I'll do an exact calculation for you based on the current Rand price, because the Rand has also weakened slightly since the last time I had a look at it. And the Bitcoin price at $62,000, and the current Rand price is 1,192,000. And we'll dig into why that price keeps moving up, hopefully in our show a little later on. But for now, Aldrin, back to you and the team. Do you own Bitcoin, Aldrin? I've never asked you this.
No.
Are you having FOMO at the moment?
I'm not, yeah.
There we go. You're so calm about it.
Unfortunately not. Yeah, I've never really caught on to the excitement around Bitcoin. You know, sometimes you watch the interviews like, okay, I hear you. Okay.
Okay,
and then
on.
I just move on.
No, it's not for everyone. It's still a high-risk asset. It's definitely one of those things where it can go from 61,000 back down to 40,000 to 50,000. So it's very volatile.
And that's the thing about that, exactly. That's the thing about that fluctuation, right? How does it dip so quickly? And then ebb so quickly.
So this is the thing, right? Unlike other markets, right? I'll do a quick summary for the interest of time. Things like Bitcoin and crypto at the moment, in a market that is unregulated by any centralized kind of regulation, it's driven by demand and supply. It's classic free flow market, right? So you rely on the number of people demanding the coin versus the number of people willing to sell at that time. Versus if you look at something like the Rand or the US dollar to the Rand, that currency pair dictates that in a market, if there is no one on the other side of that trade, then the person that regulates that product or that offers that particular currency almost stands as the underwriter, and then you sell that back towards them. So if you think about the Rand and the dollar and all of that, at some point, a central bank will have to buy back that currency. If Bitcoin goes completely pear-shaped, there isn't anyone obligated by regulation to buy it back. Until recently now with the Bitcoin ETFs. So free float markets like that operate very differently. But we'll get into that another time. Happy to get into that any other time.
Do you have any Bitcoin somewhere?
I do. It's not a significant enough piece to give me sleepless nights over, but I mean, you know.
It's there.
It's there somewhere.
It's there. Thank you so much for your time. Jimmy Moya High is back again just after 6 o'clock. We're taking your calls on 086 000 2032 and your voice notes on 0614 104 107. And you can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear. Jeez, Unfortunately, we still can't get a hold of Baba Mthethwa. His phone is still off. So we'll see if we can try and bring him on tomorrow so that you hear more about the competition that he's running, trying to find Naile Voice, the next big commentator of this country. 0614-104-107 and X at Aldrin Sampear.
Hi, Aldrin. It's Pumuzo here. I just want to get onto the liquor thing of Enyobeni. Well, the judgment failed to deter. It failed to deter. The judge failed to consider to deter any other people that might think of breaking that law. What Koketso says, I find it to be arrogant and condescending. You raised the point of deterrence, and she didn't even answer it. She just spoke fancy English and said that people don't know. The law can be interpreted in many ways. It doesn't mean that the different interpretation comes from not knowing. It's a different interpretation.
Well, she did speak about it also serving the purpose of deterring, but also emphasized the other aspect, which is appropriate. What is an appropriate sentence? Alan is joining us from Cape Town. Good evening.
Hey, Aldrin. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm all right, man. I just want to comment about the Makate issue.
Sure.
Yeah, so my take on this is I see the country is kind of divided about it, but I would say if the case didn't hold water, we wouldn't have come this far.
Exactly.
But yes, but what most people fail to consider is that corporates in general, most of them, they have one or two ideas they take from their employees and grow out of it, and people would never know. Because if it's a legal case, in many cases, an individual on their own are not able to represent themselves. So even if they wanted to pursue a legal route because they feel like they were not fairly compensated on their idea, they will never get anywhere, and most of them, they just give up. So I feel like in this case that this guy was able to fight this far, and he clearly deserves what he is getting now. And Vodacom, I would say Vodacom did this to themselves because they delayed in making this final. They could have offered this guy a lot of money back then, and the guy accepted. But they dragged it this far, and now they're paying a lot of money. Now it's painful for them, and they want to keep on dragging it. So I don't feel sorry for them, and I believe they're putting themselves in bad light as a company. I believe it's going to be bad reputation for them going forward.
Okay.
But yeah, that's my check.
Thank you so much for that. That's Ellen joining us from Cape Town. Billy is joining us from Limpopo. Good evening.
Evening, Adrian. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
South Africa has got 9 provinces. It does not have a kingdom whereby a king will address a legislature. On which basis of the constitution is the king addressing a legislature of the province? There's no constitutional imperative. What is happening in KZN is a misnomer of our democracy. We need to call that thing out. The king must go and deal with these matters of royal affairs and leave politics to the politicians. We've got kings around the country. They never address any legislature or any municipalities or, for that matter, any parliament. It's a premier who's supposed to address the House of Treasury leaders, give them marching orders, not the other way around.
Yeah. So don't you think that maybe it could be a good thing if we, even in provinces such as Limpopo, when you have a couple of kings who would then come and address the legislature, the provincial legislature? What's wrong with it? Let me ask you, what's wrong with it?
What is wrong is that kings or traditional leaders have no legal standing in law to address legislatures. They can address their own subject.
Yeah, what prevents them? Is there legislation that said that they are not allowed to?
There's no such.
Exactly.
There's no such.
Exactly.
No, I'm saying equally. It cannot be done out of the blue. There's no legislation which says they must address, because the constitution is clear. we've got some provinces which are led by the premiers, not kings.
You've got provinces that are do what?
Led by the premiers,
Yeah.
not kings.
Yeah. So what I'm asking you is that let's say, for instance, is Tony still regarded the king of Bavenda? If Tony, for instance, is
come and address the public.
Yes, and then you have let's say, for instance, you have Queen Mujaji as well, who says that I would love to address the legislature as well. What do you find wrong in that? Because the Constitution recognizes our various cultures and the traditions that we have in this country. What would you see wrong with that? With them saying that I would love to address these institutions, because after all, these institutions also disperse money to these kingdoms.
The institution is the house of traditional leaders. That's what they must go and address the position and address matters pertaining to traditional affairs.
Okay, let's see what other people have to say. Do you agree there with Billy that the king of King Misizulu, Kwazulu-Natal, shouldn't be allowed to be addressing the legislature of KwaZulu-Natal? And remember that every year when the legislature opens, it is the king that addresses the legislature as well, or opens the legislature, and then you have that entire ceremony that also takes place. Let's quickly go to Mokopane. Silo, good evening.
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Look, I think for bringing Koketo, the lawyer.
Yeah.
I think it puts more light to other listeners, because Friday it was Charles here on the radio, because listeners were crying foul, thinking that those owners should be charged for murder or the death for those kids. And the way Kukejo put it, I think I do understand. I think we also need to, in future, I think if you may, with the team, bring someone also before we call in and then explain to us this difficult or this long waiting trial, or the ones that are on public trial, to say, okay, this is what is happening, and then how do you view this verdict? Because I think we commented on something that was not aligned to the judgment, and then that's why people were so emotional and so forth.
Well, I disagree with you, Silo, because here you have the Eastern Cape Liquor Board that has brought the case that is not happy with the sentence.
My point is, many of your callers, I remember there was a guy who had, you give him time, I think before 5 o'clock or 5:30, where he explained that this judgment is not about the death.
The murder, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the death,
Yeah, he just explained. But when I was listening, the callers were saying they were thinking that the verdict was the death of the children. So I think there was misaligned there.
Yeah, but that was explained. It was explained that the magistrate, or the case before the magistrate, was not relating to the deaths, because there's an inquest that's going to be taking place. But here's my other point that I want to raise quickly, Silo, is that just because a judgment has been handed down by a magistrate or by a judge, and they followed the law, we as citizens of this country can also critique them and say that we are not happy with a judgment that has been handed down, and put forward your views why you think that you're not happy with it. I, for once, I would like to tell you now, Silo, that I'm not happy with that judgment that was handed down. In a country, wait, let me finish.
Okay.
In a country with such high levels of binge drinking amongst young people as well, and also the impact that it has on the health of pregnant women as well, I believe that you should have had a much harsher sentence. I agree with the Eastern Cape Liquor Board. It should have been a much harsher sentence, because it needs to be a deterrent. And if you listen to, let me finish. And if you listen to what the guest that we had a bit earlier on, is it Koketo, that we were speaking to, no, it's not, yes, Koketo, that we're speaking to the lawyer. She says that the maximum fine is 600,000. I think she mentioned 600,000.
Yes.
But the magistrate went for 5,000. 100 days imprisonment. The maximum is 5 years imprisonment, but the magistrate went with 100 days imprisonment. I believe that it's not sending the right message. Let me finish, Isilo. Because also, when you listen to judgments that are handed down when we speak about gender-based violence, the reference is also made around the impact that gender-based violence has on us as a society. And therefore, that also then plays a role in the sentencing that is handed down at the end of the day. So I'm one of those people who are saying that I'm not happy with the judgment that was handed down, and I think that I'm allowed to voice my dissatisfaction, and then also bring in the experts who say that, but actually the magistrate was following the law.
I hear you. I'm not saying people must not express themselves, Aldrin. I think maybe you misunderstand me there. Just the way you say, the magistrate follow the law. So should we go out of the law, Aldrin? I'm asking you. If there is a law that says if you skip the robots, you're going to be paid or going to be fined 1,500, for an example.
Yeah.
And then for some other reason, we say, no, we are going out of the law. You're gonna pay 3,000 now. So are we going to be out of the law when it suits us, or what, Aldrin? I need clarification. That yes.
Again, you heard what the Eastern Cape Liquor Board said, that the sentence that was handed down is within the prescripts of what the legislation says. But is it a deterrent? Is it the highest fine, for instance, that you can hand down? So those are the things that I'm speaking about. The example that you make of the traffic fine, if the limit is 1.2, that's the limit. It's 1.2. The magistrate can't go beyond the 1.2. But here, the magistrate didn't go to the limit. Okay. We have lost Silo there. But we've come to the end of our voyage. Thank you so much for... Okay, just need to take... Is it... What are you saying? All right. 0614-104-107.
Imagine if you could save time like you save money. A second here, a minute there. Type a little faster, walk a little faster. Or you could stop scrolling on the internet. Just think of all the hours you'll save. Now, what if you could take all that time and invest it? Watch it grow. Until eventually, one day, you'd have so much time that you wouldn't know what to do with it all. But unfortunately, time doesn't work like that. It can't be stored or banked. And unlike money, you can't make it back. That's why after 50 years of investing, we've learned that time is the greatest gift of all. And the good news is, if you invest early, time gives you money. And then money gives you more time to do whatever you want to do, even if it is scrolling on the internet. Ellen Gray, long-term investing. Ellen Gray is an authorized FSP.
USM Alja want to finish their Group A matters on a high note, while Matsatsansa Pitori target an away victory to travel back to Mzansi's capital city with pride. This is the CAF Confederation Cup. Experience the beauty of African football. USM Alja FC takes on Supersport United FC on Sunday, 3 March at 9 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
Top Sport with Michael Abramson.
What is the most and fewest number of top flight teams that can qualify for the quarterfinals this year?
Hashtag SAFMBTH.
Let's give you the names of those people that we're speaking about, the commentators. For those who guessed, Baba Mtetwa, as well as Kebo Manyapilo, as well as Michael Abrahamson. Well done. You were correct. Those are the three voices that we had in that montage of the commentators. We've come to the end of our voyage, and today we are playing out with Bongeziwe Mabandla, Zange, and our parting shot is from Cristiano Ronaldo, who once said, "Don't let small obstacles be in the way of being victorious. Remember, you are stronger than the challenges you face." And Mark from Pretoria is reading our credits this evening.
Good day, SFM listeners. My name is Mark Anton. I would like to thank the team beyond the headline. Kaya, Temba, Tui, Patrick, Charles, Vusi, and our captain by captain, Mr. Aldrin Sampear. Thanks for a great show. Awe.
Aldrin Sampear on Beyond the Headline.
And remember to love each other and lead with compassion. Dotsins, enjoy the rest of your evening.